From 1975 to 1980, the hammer-happy sadist, the Yorkshire Ripper, single-handedly created a culture of fear and paranoia for hundreds of thousands of women living in West Yorkshire, England. Women were suddenly terrified to do something as basic as walk home alone from work. The West Yorkshire police even issued an official warning for women to avoid going out at night unaccompanied. A serial killer task force had an evidence room with thousands and thousands of index cards used in the days just before computer databases began to be utilized to categorize thousands of pieces of information and hundreds of suspects. Among the many, many suspects was the real killer, a local man named Peter Sutcliffe. Sutcliffe, a married long-distance truck driver, would be interviewed 9 times before his eventual arrest, and he was never considered a serious suspect until just after he was finally apprehended. When he was apprehended, he was arrested for stolen license plates, not murder. He wasn't quite caught red-handed, but he confessed anyway. Peter's earliest known attack went back to 1969, and then after a long possible period of inactivity, during which many investigators feel certain he actually did commit many, many more crimes, Sutcliffe continued to murder and attack women in 1975. When it was all said and done, Sutcliffe said it was a miracle that he hadn't been caught earlier. Several of his victims were sex workers, but many were not. Due to common prejudices of the day against sex workers, his victims were either classified as, quote, prostitutes or respectable women by investigators and the media. An assessment that doesn't hold up well at all, just a bit cringy. The investigation to catch him became the biggest manhunt in British history. The police put in an estimated 2.5 million working hours during the Ripper inquiry. And yet, the West Yorkshire police overlooked obvious signs that should have bumped Sutcliffe much higher up on the suspect list. They ignored statements from some of his survivors, calling them unreliable witnesses, and they were easily fooled by a hoax that completely threw off their entire investigation. Today, we will meet Peter Sutcliffe, learn more about his secret life as the Yorkshire Ripper, examine how the police investigation to catch him unfolded, and share details from his infamous murder trial in the first true crime of 2025 edition of Timesuck.
This is Michael McDonald, and you're listening to Timesuck.
You're listening to Timesuck.
Well, happy Monday, and welcome to the Cult of the Curious. We return to a little bit more of a traditional episode this week. I'm Dan Cummins, the Suck Master, good boy who goes poo-poo on the potty. And you are listening to Timesuck. Hail Nimrod, hail Lucifina, praise be to good boy Bojangles, and glory be to Triple M. First episode that I'm actually recording in 2025. And wow, did my year start off with a bang, pretty literally. I was taking the family on a ski trip in Montana. When driving through Missoula on New Year's Day, we hit a big patch of black ice on a little overpass on the freeway over Reserve Street, I believe. Hit a bunch of patches of black ice over the years driving, but never one quite like this, and lost complete control of the back end of the F-150. Tried, but could not correct in time. Didn't hit the brakes. Pulled off the gas, cranked the wheel, but it just wasn't quite enough, and slammed into the concrete freeway divider at about 60 miles an hour, setting off one side of the airbags, and then 360 to cross both lanes into the guardrail, setting off the other side's airbags, then grinded to a stop on 3 wheels. One wheel was completely ripped off at the axle, just disappeared. Literally have no idea where it is. 2 other tires were blown, a whole bunch of body damage. Truck was totaled, but Lindsay, myself, the kids walked away completely unharmed. Had my life and the lives of the family flash before my eyes for a few seconds. Pretty terrifying few seconds. Truly worried I was going to be driving the truck that killed my family, but we're good. And I do not know if I have ever felt more grateful to be alive in my life. So whatever life you've got right now, man, don't take it for granted. Doesn't take a serial killer to snuff you out of nowhere sometimes. And I know you already know that. But maybe a little reminder doesn't hurt. So thanks for listening. I appreciate it. Just appreciating life. That's the attitude I'm going into 2025 with. It's kind of a weird mood to be in as I'm going to do a serial killer suck right here because I'm very happy. But yeah, I appreciate a lot of shit right now, including all of you listening. I also wonder, where was my dad a little bit before my crash? He does live less than a 5-hour drive from Missoula. Did he pull some kind of Wile E. Coyote shit? Grease that overpass, try and take us out? He knew where I was going. And I don't know for sure where he was on January 1st. That motherfucker, that literal motherfucker. Do you know on top of everything else, my dad fucked my mom? Unbelievable. There's no limit to what that man's capable of. Okay, enough nonsense. Here we go, you beautiful living bastards. So laying out all of today's dirty details by beginning with an overview of how the police investigation into catching Peter was impacted by prejudices towards sex workers and how terror over the Yorkshire Ripper affected daily life for so many women in Northern England, followed by a timeline of Peter Sutcliffe's life, crimes, and trial. Authorities strangely categorized the victims of the Yorkshire Ripper by labeling them as members of one of two groups: prostitutes, as I said earlier, and respectable women. Yikes. That reads way too much like good girls and bitches who had it coming. Making things even worse, whether a victim was a sex worker or not, the police believed they were engaging in behavior that attracted the killer's attention, such as getting into cars with men they had just met, having the audacity to be out alone at night, drink alone at a pub, etc. After investigators realized that the killer was not solely targeting sex workers, one detective actually said he was after, quote, innocent victims. And again, that infers that sex workers are kind of asking for it. Why not just say that sex work is very dangerous? And for your own safety, please abstain from that type of work. For your own safety, right? Don't go out alone. That makes sense. Sex work is dangerous. Going out alone, sadly, as a woman to the bars, clubs, is dangerous. Getting into a stranger's car, driving out into the woods to have sex for money with someone you literally just met, especially in the days before cell phones, wildly dangerous. But it doesn't make you a terrible person. You're not assaulting people, not stealing from people, not molesting kids, so why the moral judgment there? If anything, shouldn't sex workers out walking the streets be pitied? Shouldn't we consider what horrible shit likely led to them, feeling that this is their best option to make money? The West Yorkshire police did later issue an apology for the language used by law enforcement during the investigation, yet these attitudes continued at Peter's trial. For example, the prosecutor said, quote, some were prostitutes, but perhaps the saddest part of the case is that some were not. The last 6 attacks were on totally respectable women. Damn, dude. What's really tragic about these murders was that not all of the women were dirty, dirty whores whose lives weren't worth shit to begin with. I mean, right, fellas? You get it? Come on. Some of the bikes Pete Dog took for a spin were still pretty clean. You know what I'm saying? They still had chains, gears, weren't all rusted out, covered in cum and shit. Some of these bitches had value. And that's what really is tragic about the whole situation. Sutcliffe himself said, the women I killed were filth. Bastard prostitutes who were littering the streets. I was just cleaning up the place a bit. Oh, well, thanks, Pete. What a fucking hero you were. I mean, you could have went after gangbangers, filling the streets with violence that spills out into people who have nothing to do with turf wars. You could have went after pedos, molesting kids, some of which won't get the therapy they need, will end up as sex workers themselves. You could have went after drug dealers, selling like heroin to kids. But no, not you. You went after the real threat to society. People sucking dick for money. Ah, what a fucking champion. It was still difficult for survivors to get a basic level of respect even when they worked with the police. They provided accurate, often similar descriptions of the attacker, but still, the police considered them unreliable if they were sex workers or even if they were just women having sex outside of marriage. For example, survivor Maureen Long was labeled a, quote, woman of loose morals by the authorities simply because she was separated from her husband and living with another man at the time she was attacked. I mean, if you're just going to give that pussy away without getting a ring first, you're kind of asking to have your brain bashed in with a hammer. On top of a level of victim blaming by police and often the press as well, so many of the survivors of Pete's terrifying bludgeon and slash attacks would never fully recover from the trauma they received. Teresa Sykes was just 16 years old when Sutcliffe left her for dead near her home in November of 1980. She said, I used to go to my bedroom of a night and put the wardrobe behind the door, put the dressing table behind the door. I had to sleep with a knife under the pillow, which my mom used to go barmy about, but that was the only thing that made me feel that bit safer. She later broke off her engagement with the father of her child because she had become so terrified of men in general. Survivor Olive Smelt echoed her feelings, saying, I couldn't stand a man near me. I rejected my husband completely. If he made any sort of advance, I shuddered in horror. She said her marriage only survived because she was so determined to overcome her fear. She even took a job at a men's hostel, so she would be forced to be around men she didn't know. Mo Leo was attacked in Maureen, attacked in October of 1980, but Sutcliffe never charged for that crime. Leah told The Guardian, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and there are all sorts of things that I struggle with because of the attack. Before Sutcliffe was arrested, so many women lived in fear of being attacked, like the survivors I just mentioned, while going about their daily routines. The police issued a formal notice in 1980 that was published by local papers, and it said, do not go out at night unless absolutely necessary, and only if accompanied by a man you know, unless you are a filthy, degenerate prostitute. In that case, do whatever you want. We don't give a bloody fuck what happens to you. In our eyes, you're basically already dead. They didn't write that last bit about sex workers, but it seems as if they may have believed it. Many British women were understandably angry that the Ripper was affecting their safety and their freedom. Large crowds of women gathered in the streets for candlelit vigils. One feminist group posted notices all around the city, mocking the police, writing, attention all men in West Yorkshire. There is a serial killer on the loose in the area. Out of consideration for the safety of women, please ensure you are indoors by 8 p.m. each evening so that women can go about their business without the fear you may provoke by simply walking behind her. That's pretty funny. Hey guys, we wouldn't have to stay indoors if you rapey fucks kept your dangerous, dirty dinglings inside. Fuck is wrong with you assholes? Ruth Bundy, a solicitor, aka a lawyer, who lived in Chapeltown, West Yorkshire, and later represented some of the victims, told the BBC how the murders caused mass fear, saying, suspicion, looking at one's neighbors and thinking, could it be him? Anybody who had a car dropping a woman home would wait until you had seen the woman get up to her front door, go in and put the light on, and you wouldn't go away until that had happened. Peter McGoldrick, a student at the University of Leeds when the murders were still occurring, recalled, I remember meeting girls that I did not know, asking me if I would walk them across the park until they got to the other side. That was a common thing across the student population. You would not hesitate to offer someone an escort. And how much did that suck for those female students? How many of them were so torn between asking a guy to walk with them or not asking that guy because they worried that maybe he was the killer? Former Ripper Squad detective Bob Bridgestock said, prior to the Josephine Whitaker murder, people felt that he was only targeting women that were prostitutes or sex workers. That's kind of a weird thing, prostitutes or sex workers. Is there a difference? But after her death, that changed. Nobody was safe. No female was safe. It created mass hysteria. People used to say that they wouldn't go out anymore until he was caught. They daren't. He had created a culture of fear. People were saying, look at your brother, your father, your uncle. Is that person that might be the Ripper? Is this the person that might be the Ripper? Yeah, that's how much fear the Ripper's murders and other attacks caused. Now let's look in detail at the specific attacks that led to that fear in today's Timesuck timeline.
Strap on those boots, soldier. We're marching down a Timesuck timeline.
Our main source for this timeline, not the only source, but the main one, is the book Wicked Beyond Belief, The Hunt for the Yorkshire Ripper, written by Michael Bilton and published in 2003. I'll reference Bilton fairly often. Michael was an investigative writer for the Sunday Times magazines and is an award-winning documentary filmmaker, documentarian, started writing about the Yorkshire Ripper investigation back in 1979. Here we go. Peter William Sutcliffe. Peter Billy. Born June 2nd, 1946, in Bingley, West Yorkshire. West Yorkshire is one of England's so-called ceremonial counties. It's in northern England. Even if it looks to be in the heart of England to me on a map, it is referred to as Northern England and is the main setting of this episode. Throughout the timeline, you'll hear multiple city names that are part of West Yorkshire. Sadly, you won't hear much of anything about Yorkshire pudding. A delicious baked pudding that looks a lot more like a muffin to me than it does a pudding, made from a batter of eggs, flour, and milk or water. Bingley is a small city, or I guess a town really, a market town, with a population of just over 18,000 per the 2021 census. It's been around going back to some point before the 11th century, and it's also randomly the birthplace of the Airedale Terrier, if that's your dog of choice and you're curious. Bojangles thought that was an important detail to include. Sutcliffe's parents, John and Kathleen, would have 6 children total, 3 boys and 3 girls. They're described in most sources as having been a working-class Catholic family. John Sutcliffe said in an archived interview that Peter was clingy towards his mother and preferred to be with her over other boys. He was a kind and timid loner, according to his father. John appeared to be very disappointed in his son and was emotionally distant from Peter. John was also a real cockface, real shitbird of a father. Journalist and novelist Joan Smith explained in the 2020 docuseries The Ripper, "When I did a bit of research on his background, the key thing that I noticed is that he grew up in an atmosphere where contempt for women and dislike of women was normalized. And the idea that women are victims, all of that, was there already." Smith said that Peter frequently saw his father beat his mother, and when he sided with his mother after these beatings, he was called a sissy or some equivalent. Another great dad showing up in a serial killer suck. Oh, shocker. So many good, strong dads in these serial killer sucks. Good job, John, you cowardly fuck. Men who beat women, truly some of the biggest bitches on the planet, aren't they? Someone should create a reality TV show where these guys are forced to get into the octagon with, retired MMA fighters, or I guess they could be active, whatever. Strong dudes, same size, who actually know how to fight, and then see how many beatings these cowards dish out in that setting. I mean, seriously, how entertaining would that show be? Before the fight starts, we get to hear what they have done to the women in their lives, see police photos of the victims' injuries if the victims are okay with that. Get the audience really fucking worked up. Jonesing to see these motherfuckers' blood get spilt. And they don't get to tap out either. Fight only stops when someone has literally been beaten unconscious. Oh, fucking ratings goldmine. Anyway, John's behavior taught his son Peter that weakness was a feminine trait and violence was a masculine trait. Peter's youngest brother Carl verified in a 2020 interview that John was abusive, saying, "My dad was a drinker. He used to belt the hell out of all of us when we were kids. I remember when I was about 4 or 5, there was a bit of an argument, and he smashed a beer glass into Peter's head. It was at the Christmas dinner table." Jesus. And it was one of those big chunky glasses with dimples in it. It was over something and nout that really stuck in my mind. That's got to be some slang there. And now, I don't know. That would stick in my mind too, though. Smashing a fucking thick glass, big old beer glass onto your son's head. That is batshit. Once when John suspected that his wife, Kathleen, was cheating on him, he confronted her about it in front of all the kids, like a classy motherfucker. Carl Sutcliffe said in his interview, "My dad was a womanizer. He was terrible. She never cheated on him ever in her life. But one night, she just went out for a drink with a man, probably to get her own back. He found out about it and dragged all the family along. He was having it off with a woman across from us when I was a kid. He moved in with her for a bit. There's probably more of us scattered around Bingley, probably got brothers and sisters all over." Carl was unsure why his father was violent because their grandfather was not, his father's father. He has the same questions regarding his brother. Carl described growing up with a serial killer, saying, "He was great with me normally. He was a brilliant brother. He'd buy me presents, take me to the pictures and the skating rink." I mean, there's quite an age gap here. Wasn't all brotherly love, though. According to Carl, "I do remember there was one time when he held me by the feet out of my bedroom window. I thought he's not going to drop me, but he did, on my head. I had a twisted neck, and I had a real sore neck for weeks." Yeah, lucky your leg still worked after that. What a fun home for Carl to grow up in. As a teen, Peter continued being a loner. He was bullied by his peers. Wasn't a very big guy. He dropped out of school in 1961 at the age of only 15, went through a series of odd jobs, worked as a traveling salesman for a time, later as a factory line worker. In 1963, 17-year-old Sutcliffe appeared before local magistrates in Keighley, West Yorkshire, for his first known criminal offenses. He was charged with driving unaccompanied while being a provisional license holder and failing to display L plates, special plates required for provisional drivers. If only he would have been sentenced to death. I mean, obviously, only a future serial killer would ever drive unaccompanied while only being a provisional license holder. Sutcliffe would receive a similar traffic conviction in May of 1964 in the city of Bradford, West Yorkshire. That son of a bitch didn't give two shits about the law. Off with his head. In total, Peter would receive 11 driving convictions over the course of his life. 1964, Sutcliffe started working as a grave digger. Eventually got a job at a local morgue, and not surprisingly, he fucking loved it. Loved working with dead bodies. Such a ghoul. It was his favorite job. Sutcliffe bragged to friends about stealing from the dead at the morgue, and I gotta wonder how many corpses he diddled. At least a few, I'm guessing. By the time he had access to those dead bodies, he had already developed sexually voyeuristic tendencies. He'd become somewhat obsessed with watching sex workers do their business on the streets of Leeds, the largest city in West Yorkshire. While he would, I'm guessing, beat off in the bushes. Once he began living on his own, he began hiring sex workers, some of whom would become his victims. In March of 1965, Sutcliffe had one of his first serious brushes with law enforcement. Even more serious than driving unaccompanied with just a provisional license. So fucking, I hope you're sitting down. He was arrested when he and a young man named Eric Robinson were caught pulling on the door handles of a locked vehicle with property in the backseat. Property they clearly were looking to steal. Didn't get more than a slap on the wrist for this offense, pretty minor offense. He was fined that May, which marked the start of his official criminal record, because minor traffic citations don't really qualify as being part of one's criminal record. Sorry to break it to anybody listening who considers himself an outlaw for speeding or for parking in a no parking area. Sorry, but you're no Josie Wales. Over the next few years, Sutcliffe's crimes increased in severity from theft to violence. Sutcliffe's next recorded criminal offense occurred September 30th, 1969 in Bradford, West Yorkshire, near the city's red light district. Late that night, an officer spotted him sitting in a car with the engine running and the lights off. When the officer approached the vehicle, he sped off. His vehicle was quickly found, but it was unoccupied now. Sutcliffe was soon found nearby with a hammer on him. He didn't provide a satisfactory explanation for having that hammer, but denied any criminal intent. I mean, he was probably just sitting in a dark car in an area, frequented by sex workers, with a hammer, just doing some home improvement project brainstorming. Sometimes you got to take your hammer away from where you intend to do your hammering in order to just get your mind right and figure out how to most effectively build that new interior wall or back porch, deck or whatever. He was charged with going equipped to steal, which is a minor offense. He would later admit he fully intended to attack a woman with that hammer that night. Now, fucking hammers. They have come up in several serial killer episodes, and they always make me cringe, just make my skin crawl. So much scarier to me than a knife. Just a brutal, bludgeoning weapon. I would much rather have somebody approach me with a knife than a hammer. 2 weeks later, Peter pled not guilty to the charge, but was convicted and fined 25 pounds. 1969 was the year Sutcliffe, now 23, committed his first known attack. Most of the people extremely familiar with this case seem to think he had almost certainly committed attacks before this, but this is the first one he would later confess to. He said he was in a vehicle with a friend, searching for a sex worker who had tricked him out of his money. Couldn't find her, but when he spotted a different woman he assumed was also a sex worker, he decided to follow her into a garage where he attacked her with a stone-filled sock. Hit her in the back of the head. Busted out a brick bat. Oh man, just as scary as a hammer. Actually, I'm not sure which would be worse to be bashed with. Sock with a rock in it or hammer? Guess it depends on the size of the hammer and the size of the rock in the sock. Peter later confessed, I got out of the car, went across the road and hit her. The force of the impact tore the toe off the sock and whatever was in it came out. Oh, what do you mean whatever? The fucking giant rock, you piece of shit. I went back to the car and got in it. The victim would both live and contact the police, and they were able to figure out Sutcliffe's identity through his car registration. They told him he was lucky because the victim didn't want to press charges. Very weird to me that you would need to press charges if a stranger bashes you in the head with a fucking rock. I feel like you shouldn't need the victim to press charges in that situation. It should just automatically be a serious crime. Officially, the next victim was attacked in 1975, but again, many of those very familiar with this case think that Peter attacked many, many women between 1969 and 1975, and that he in all likelihood killed a lot of the women he attacked during this period of time. Although Peter Sutcliffe was not prosecuted for the following crime that occurred in 1972, this victim strongly believes he was her attacker. December 29th of that year, a 19-year-old clerk typist was attacked in West Yorkshire. Unnamed victim was contacted decades later by a documentary team in October of 1998 and recalled the attack saying, I was sure I'd been attacked by the Yorkshire Ripper, but nobody had ever confirmed the fact. She said she went out to get a drink, was walking home around 10:30 at night. Soon she realized she was being followed by a man with longish dark hair and a beard. She considered going into a pub she passed by on her way home to be safe, but then she thought that the people inside would think that she was imagining things, and so she just kept walking. And I gotta say, if you're ever in this situation, go into the pub. Who gives a fuck what strangers think of you? Trust your gut, right? Better safe than sorry. The woman had just reached her row of terraced houses when the man grabbed her from behind. She screamed. The attacker put his hands over her mouth, told her to shut up. She noticed that he sounded like a Yorkshire local, an important detail to keep in mind as the killer's accent will become a central piece of the investigation. She screamed again. Then he hit her on the back of the head with what she assumes was his fist, pushed her into a wall. Luckily, an officer who happened to live nearby heard the attack, opened his window, saw what was going on, and ended up chasing the attacker away, but didn't quite catch him. Victim gave a statement, was told to go to the police station the next day. She went, but then she felt like the police did not take her report seriously. When Peter was arrested years later, she said to her family, "I'm sure that's the man who attacked me." She claimed she never heard from the police after making her initial complaint. Another woman was attacked 2 years later, November 11th, 1974 in Bradford. Interestingly, my dad would have been 20 years old at this point. And no, I don't have a fucking clue where he was. Did Peter commit this crime alone, or did my dad help him or frame him? It's just something to keep in mind the rest of the episode. I texted my dad a list of the dates of all of Peter's known attacks and murders, followed by a question of, where were you? All he did was send back a laughing emoji like it's a fucking joke, like a psychopath. I suggest you text your dad the same message. We all know, at this point, most murders are in fact committed by dads. And while Peter was a lot of things, he wasn't a father, which makes me wonder if he was even capable of the crimes he was committed for, he was charged with and found guilty of. If you're very confused right now, well, you probably haven't been listening for very long. Don't worry about it. Just worry about your dad. How much do you really know about him? As I was saying earlier, another woman was attacked 2 years later, November 11th, 1974, Bradford. She would come to believe Peter was the man who attacked her, not my dad. 28-year-old Gloria Wood was walking across a school playing field between 7:30 and 8 o'clock at night. A man offered to carry her bags and then just fucking snapped moments later out of nowhere. Started viciously attacking her with a hammer, leaving her with a fractured skull. She described the attacker as a man of medium build in his early 30s. Peter was 28 at this time, but he did look older than his years. She said he had dark curly hair, which Peter did, curly beard, which did. She could not remember his accent, possibly because it did not stand out because he was local to Yorkshire. As you'll see later in the timeline, this attack very similar to other known Ripper attacks / murders, but never formally linked to Sutcliffe's crimes, and he never confessed to it. Next known attack, July 5th, 1975 in Keighley, West Yorkshire. 36-year-old Anna Ragulskij, no idea how to say her last name. Rogulskyj. Walking home alone when she was hit with, again, a hammer. Fucking hammer? God, that would hurt so much. Makes you feel a little weak in the stomach thinking about getting hit in the head with a hammer. After being bashed in her head, Peter slashed her on the stomach with a knife. A neighbor then disturbed the attacker and he fled. Miraculously, Anna would survive after undergoing brain surgery. She was, of course, traumatized by the attack, later saying, "I've been afraid to go out much because I feel people are staring and pointing at me. The whole thing is making my life a misery. I sometimes wish I had died in the attack." Yeah, I bet she was fucked up. I would be super fucked up. If a stranger popped out of the shadows, bashed me in the head with a hammer, slashed me with a knife in the stomach, and then just ran off. I'm guessing for years she worried that he'd show back up, hit and slash her again. On August 15th, 1975, 46-year-old Olive Smelt, an office cleaner from Halifax, West Yorkshire, became the next victim of a hammer attack. She made some small talk about the weather with a dude she judged to be in his 30s with dark hair and a beard. Didn't notice anything off about his accent, which indicated he was probably local. And then out of nowhere, when she wasn't looking, the bastard hit her in the back of the head with a hammer, followed that up by lifting up her shirt to slash her lower back with a knife. The attack again interrupted, and Olive was left for dead. Like the previous victim, Smelt subsequently suffered severe emotional and mental trauma in the aftermath of the attack. Also, I should probably play a little clip of somebody speaking in a Yorkshire accent, just so you know what it sounds like if you're not from Yorkshire or familiar with it. It is pretty distinctive.
"Hey up, lad. It's Dan. I'm from Yorkshire. I didn't get up while 3 o'clock. I had 4 pints of Tetley's. I went down the pub, had another 5 pints. Then I went home, beat up wife, went Ellen Road, seen Leeds United, beat Sheffield Wednesday 4-0. Had a Yorkshire pudding, roast tater dinner with gravy and old trimmings. It were lovely. Absolutely top. Went to Barbican Centre to watch snooker."
I watched so many local videos from West Yorkshire trying to get the correct pronunciation of this or that town. And most of the time, after listening the first time, I would just mutter some variation of like, what the fuck are they even saying? It's if you're not used to it, it's a very thick accent and a little hard to understand. I'm like, is this also English? August 28th, I'm sure they would say the same about me and my mush mouth. August 28th, 1975, young 14-year-old Tracy Brown was attacked while walking home in the village of Silsden, also in West Yorkshire. In 1992, Peter Sutcliffe would confess to hitting a 14-year-old girl with a hammer the month Tracy was attacked. He was 29 at the time. Tracy remembered that she and her twin sister Mandy had gone out earlier the day to visit some friends. They both were told to be home by 10:30 by their parents. Mandy went home first. Tracy decided to stay a little bit later. Eventually, she started heading home. She walked down a country lane. She'd walked down a bunch of times before. This time, her shoes started to hurt her feet, so she sat down on a large stone on the side of the road to take a little break. Spotted a stranger she assumed to be in his late 20s or early 30s walking up the lane. He stopped to look at her before he continued on. She soon caught up with him, and when she did, he asked her, "There's nothing doing in Silsden, is there?" And she replied, "Not really." He then asked her how far she had to go. She said about a mile. He now introduced himself as Tony Jennis, asked her for her name, and then, like a true creep, asked her if she had a boyfriend. She did. They then continued to walk in silence for a while. Tracy was able to get a good look at the man with the dark curly hair. She later recalled that he never took his hands out of his pockets. He's probably just rubbing that hammer. And in one pocket, knife in the other. After a long period of silence, he said, "My pal normally gives me a lift home, but he's in the nick for drink driving." I hope that quote is entirely accurate. "The pal normally gives me a lift home, but he's in the nick for drink driving." I'm sorry, what? They eventually reached the gate to Tracy's family farm after walking together for about half an hour. Tracy later said that she never felt intimidated, never felt threatened during their walk. But then as she was preparing to say her goodbye, out of nowhere, strikes her in the head and face with a heavy object. Tracy cries out, please don't, and she falls to her knees. She also shouts, "Black Panther," the name of an unknown serial killer on the loose in that area at that time. Black Panther was actually later identified not long after this attack, in December of 1975, as Donald Nielsen, and he would be convicted of 4 murders. He would die in prison in 2011 at the age of 75. When a car approached, Peter scooped Tracy up, threw her over a barbed wire fence, and then fled. She was badly hurt, but still conscious. She was blinded by blood dripping into her eyes. She staggered around until she was able to get to a farm worker's caravan, aka a RV, nearby, and he helped her get home. Tracy's mother recalled thinking somebody had thrown a bucket of red paint over her daughter when she first saw her, and then she saw a literal hole in the top of her daughter's head, and that's terrifying. Tracy will be treated for a skull fracture at the hospital. She will suffer from seizures for the next 2 years, in addition to some level of PTSD, I'm sure. A forensic analysis determined that Tracy was beaten with a claw hammer. That's fucking savage. Her description of the killer and photo fit were published in a few local papers. A second witness also provided a description of a man who was attacked in a similar fashion and helped with a photo fit, but this was never made public. And a photo fit, by the way, it's just a method of combining photos of facial features into one composite photo. So very similar to like a composite sketch. Peter's first known murder victim will be found in 1975, 28-year-old Wilma McCann. On October 30th of that year, Wilma was murdered just 100 yards from her back door in Leeds. A milkman named Alan Rutledge found her body at the Prince Philip playing fields at 7:41 a.m. He got out of his vehicle to make his delivery at the Prince Philip Center, saw what he thought was a bundle of rags at the far side of the parking lot near the back of the caretaker's house and the sports field clubhouse. He and his 10-year-old brother, who was with him on his route, approached and found a woman whose throat had been slit. Man, what a terrible memory for a 10-year-old. Wilma's handbag strap was still looped around her left hand. Her slacks were pulled down below her knees, her blouse and jacket ripped apart, and her bra had been pulled up to expose her breasts. She'd been stabbed multiple times in the throat, also in the chest, below her breast, and in the stomach. The police quickly learned her identity, learned that the back entrance to her home opened out to the playing field. Neighbors said Wilma lived with her 4 kids and was separated from her husband. Kids had been out looking for her that morning. Ugh. She had 4 convictions for drunkenness, theft, and disorderly conduct. Detectives also learned that Wilma was a sex worker and often used the back entrance of her home to conceal the fact that she would leave her kids alone for several hours and return late at night. She was originally from Scotland, one of 11 kids. Dad was a farm worker. She had become pregnant with her first daughter, Sonia, before she was 20. After Sonia was born, she met Gerald Christopher McCann from Northern Ireland, and they married in October of 1968, moved to Leeds a couple years later, had 3 more kids together, but then separated in February of 1974, or by February of 1974. She didn't seem interested in settling down. Jerry left, was living with another woman at the time of the murder. He wanted a divorce, and Wilma was willing to grant him one. 2 lacerations were found on her scalp during the post-mortem exam. One wound resulted in a deep skull fracture. The pathologist determined she was hit on the head, most likely with, I bet you can guess, yep, a hammer, and then stabbed 15 times. Such a strange MO. Hammer followed by knife slashes or stabs. Semen was not found inside of Wilma's body, but semen was found on the back of her trousers, which indicated the killer could have, probably did, masturbate over her body. Wilma had left home around 7:30 p.m. the previous evening. She had told her daughter she was going to town again, would be back later. She visited a few different pubs from 8:30 to 10:30, went to a nightclub at 11:30 p.m. Last seen around 1 a.m. by 2 officers in a patrol car. Other witnesses said she was hitchhiking by jumping out in front of the cars and forced them to stop. That's pretty aggressive hitchhiking method. She appeared to be drunk. There were reports that a truck driver stopped in the area. Wilma was last seen alive. One eyewitness thought they saw her talking to a truck driver. A week later, the police set up roadblocks, found the driver who spoke to Wilma, but he claimed he didn't give her a ride that night. Within 6 weeks, police ran out of leads and her case went cold. A few months later, January 20th, 1976, another victim murdered in Leeds, 41-year-old Emily Jackson. On January 21st, her body is found in an alley between 2 dilapidated buildings scheduled for demolition. A man found the body on his way to work that morning. Drag marks indicated the victim had been moved there after death. She still had her overcoat and clothes on, but her feet were bare. Investigators found a muddy footprint on her thigh, and her face was also covered with mud and blood. Emily's handbag was next to her head, which helped the police quickly establish her identity. She was from Morley, a town west of Leeds. A boot impression was later found in a roadway near the entrance of the alley. Detectives made a plaster cast of this impression, cut out the section of Emily's tights that contained the boot print. Emily's outer clothing showed no signs of stab wounds. However, her bra was lifted above her breasts, and she'd been stabbed in the back and buttocks. There were small stab wounds caused by an X-shaped instrument, which investigators consider, quote, very odd. And she had been stabbed a lot with this odd instrument. In total, she had been stabbed 52 times. One of the possibilities for the murder weapon, very likely the weapon, a Phillips screwdriver. Man, that fucker. Emily also had lacerations on the top and back of her head, resulting in skull fractures, most likely caused by a hammer. Had bruises and abrasions on her face and throat from being dragged. And there was evidence that her neck had been compressed. Finally, semen was found inside her body, but perhaps not from the killer. When interviewing Emily's husband, Sidney Jackson, detectives learned that she regularly had sex with other men because he could not satisfy her intense sex drive. At least that's what he told him initially, but not the truth. He failed to mention that Emily had been doing sex work since Christmas to fix their financial problems. He later admitted that he often accompanied her when she went out looking for clients, but not, obviously, when she was killed. Dude sounds like a fucking bum. Emily and Sidney had been married for 23 years since 1953. Did not appear to be a loving marriage, though, and they most likely stayed together for the kids. Emily had left him after 6 years of marriage. Then they got back together 2 years later, 1961, started a roofing business together. Sadly, their 14-year-old son, Derek, died in 1970 after he fell out of a window. Emily was described as a very hard-working woman. She picked up supplies for the roofing business, drove workers to the job sites, picked up the kids from school, did the business paperwork, apparently even did sex work to pick up the slack from Sidney, who doesn't sound like he did much of anything. On the night of the murder, Sidney rode with Emily in their van to the Gaiety pub in Roundhay Road in Leeds, or on Roundhay Road in Leeds. Sidney went into the pub to get drunk. Emily went looking for clients. Again, Sidney, you fucking bum. Sidney remained inside until 10:30 p.m. in the pub. Emily didn't meet him at their scheduled time, so he assumed she was with a client and just took a cab back home and went to bed. Sidney would become suspect number 1 in the murder. The day after Emily's body was found, he spoke to reporters saying, "I know what people are saying, but I didn't do it. There's nothing I want to say to the man who did it. There's nothing I can say. But if he's done it once, he'll do it again. I just pray they catch him." Do you pray that, buddy? That's weird. There's nothing you would like to say to the man who killed your wife? Man, no part of me understands that. If that was my wife, there'd be a lot of fucking shit I'd want to say. As I ideally crushed his fucking throat with my bare hands and watched the light fade out of his eyes. 2 days into the investigation, the police asked local sex workers to come forward with information and revealed that Emily used her work van to solicit clients. She sometimes left her van in the parking lot, went with clients into their personal cars, and this was most likely how she encountered her killer. Newspapers quickly linked her murder to the murder of Wilma McCann a few months earlier. The Sun released an article January 23rd with the headline, Ripper Hunted in Call Girl Murders. A month after the murder, a witness reported that she saw Emily get into a Land Rover the night she was killed, about 7 p.m. Another sex worker said she was talking to Emily moments before she got into the vehicle and that the driver was a man with a bushy beard, like Sutcliffe had. But the man who drove the Land Rover was identified and cleared up because he had a solid alibi. No attempt was made to trace the boot print because the police believe too many workmen in the city just wore that style of boot. Fair. However, a message was sent out to all West Yorkshire police stations asking that anyone arrested wearing similar boots be held for further questioning. Less than 4 months later, May 9th, 1976, 20-year-old Marcella Claxton attacked at Roundhay Park in Leeds. This is a gorgeous park I was not familiar with. The Rolling Stones will actually hold a concert at this park 6 years later in 1982, and over 120,000 people will attend. Marcella was a single mom of 2 kids in foster care and was 3 months pregnant at the time of the attack. She'd had a rough life. She had been abused by her father throughout her childhood. She was also intellectually disabled. Her estimated IQ was only about 50. Average intelligence begins with an IQ score of 85. The police initially believed she was a sex worker, but she was not. She went out to a drink at a local club the night she was killed, leaving around 5 a.m. to head back home. Saw a white-colored car cruising the area, and the driver stopped to ask her if she was, quote, doing business. Marcella said no, but the driver got out anyway, led her back to his car, said he was taking her to Roundhay Park for sex. Once they got there, he asked her to take off her clothes, gave her 5 pounds. She told him she had to piss first, and then she hid from him in the bushes. After about 10 minutes passed, thinking he had gone, she came out to get her clothes. Suddenly, she was struck on the head by a blunt object. She fell down. Now she pretended to be unconscious, and the attacker soon drove off. So IQ might not have been high, but she sure seemed to be street smart. Marcella said in a later interview that the attacker masturbated in front of her and said, "Don't phone the police," while she laid and pretended to be unconscious. Once he'd actually left, Marcella stumbled to the edge of the park to get to a payphone, called the police. While she waited for an ambulance, she saw the driver of the white car again prowling around, even returned to the scene of her attack, but didn't spot Marcella and continued driving. By the time first responders arrived, he was gone. Doctors found 8 scalp lacerations on Marcella's head, and she spent 6 days in the hospital. She suffered a miscarriage, so Peter killed her unborn child, and she experienced headaches and blackouts for an unknown amount of time following the attack. She was terrified the man would come back for her. She talked to the police, described the attacker as a white man with dark hair, dark beard, dark mustache. Police did not believe her, and this is so fucked. They said that the person responsible had to have been a black man. What the fuck? Look. I get that you were the one attacked and all that stuff, but there's no fucking way white guy would do that to you. No, name one white dude who's ever killed or tried to kill a woman. You can't. It had to have been a black guy. One internal inquiry reported, although she had been struck about the head with an unknown instrument, there were factors which were dissimilar to previous Ripper attacks. Most significant was the absence of stabbing to the body, and there was the motive of taking the money and running away. Officers were aware of the dangers of including details of an incident, which was not part of the series because it would mislead the investigation as a whole. That sounds like a bunch of well-worded bullshit. At a hearing before the Criminal Inquiries Compensation Board, West Yorkshire officials said Marcella misled them by giving an inaccurate description of her attacker because her memory was impaired and her application was rejected. Soon after the attack, she was having a drink at the Gaiety pub, and the man who assaulted her walked in, then quickly walked out. She and her friends ran outside to try and find him, but he was gone. 9 months later, February 5th, 1977, 28-year-old Irene Richardson is murdered in Roundhay Park. Same place where Marcella had just been brutally attacked May 9th, 1976. Roundhay Park, known for being a place where sex workers would bring their clients. Part of the park was a sports recreation area, and on the morning of February 6th, the woman's dead body was found on the muddy ground in the shade of a pavilion used as a locker room. Victim's head, neck, and clothing were bloody. One of her feet was bare, other had just a sock on it. Tampon was found beside her body, and a trail of blood led to a handbag lying in the leaves just 4 feet away that contained Irene's ID. Tire tracks were found between the body and the back of the pavilion, leading to the road, and Irene had a large wound at the front of her throat. Her hands were resting on her lower abdomen, which concealed a large slash wound on the left side of her stomach. The wound was so deep, so big, her intestines were literally spilling out. Peter seems to be getting more violent. Irene had also been bashed in the skull with a blunt, heavy object. The dimensions of the wound indicate that it was, of course, a hammer. Testing indicated she had sexual intercourse within 24 hours of her death, and there were semen stains on her clothing. Might not have been the killer's, though. At least, the killer might not have had intercourse with her. She was reportedly engaged in sex work near the time of her death. While looking into Irene's background, the police discovered Irene had applied for a job as a nanny for a family in Roundhay a week or so earlier. Hadn't heard if she'd gotten the job or not yet. She was struggling financially, only had about 35 pence on her at the time of the murder. So think 35 cents. Irene had moved to London a dozen years earlier in 1965, cut off contact with her family for 5 years, had 2 kids as a teenager, both of whom ended up in foster care, sadly. She moved to Blackpool, Lancashire, married George Richardson in June of 1971. They had 2 more kids together, and Irene worked at the local Pontins holiday camp. Think of like a campsite where there's some glamping cabins or kind of a low-key resort, relatively cheap to stay at. After her second daughter was born, Irene suffered from postpartum depression, left for London without saying where she was going. Her husband reported her missing, and she would not contact him for a few months. The pair attempted to reconcile. Then Irene ran off again in April of 1976. That was the last time George saw her, and their daughters now also went into foster care. Irene then started dating Stephen Bray, a recent prison escapee, so she's not doing well. She's not making a lot of good choices. She's spiraling. The pair came to Leeds in October of 1976, lived in boarding houses in Chapeltown, in the area of Chapeltown. Irene worked a variety of odd jobs, planned to marry Bray, despite the fact that she was still married. Neither one of them showed up to their scheduled wedding, and Bray left for London in January of 1977. Just 10 days before she died, Irene failed to show up to one of her jobs. She had asked for an advance on her wages because she had a bill to pay, but her boss could only give her £1. She later came to work, apologized for her behavior, said she had to get away from the man she was living with. A week before she was murdered, a man showed up at her job, collected her wages. She spent the last 2 weeks of her life wandering the streets, sometimes sleeping in a public restroom when she couldn't afford a place to stay. On the night of February 5th, Irene told a friend that she was going to Tiffany's Dance Hall in Leeds to find the guy she had been hoping to marry, that Stephen Bray guy. Didn't find him. Visited another friend until 11:30. Before midnight, she got into a stranger's car, most likely to perform some sex work out of desperation. 4 days after the murder, the West Yorkshire police sought the public's help in finding Marcella Claxton, who they hoped could help with the investigation that maybe was the same attacker. Remember, Marcella attacked in almost the same spot as Irene. She spoke to detectives in February 1977, mentioned for the second time the attacker was driving a white car. And according to author Michael Bilden, the police ignored a tip from a woman who reported that around 11:35 p.m., a woman in the area of Irene's murder propositioned by a man in a white car. The next morning, and Peter was driving a white car at this time, next morning the police held a press conference, said Marcella gave them a description, but added, "This is not necessarily the description of the murder." What the fuck is their deal with Marcella? The police did not mention that the attacker had a beard or a mustache, did not release the photo fit Marcella helped prepare on March 19th, 1976. On February 9th, the Leeds Evening Paper reported that the Lancashire police were comparing the Leeds cases to the murder of sex worker Joan Harrison, who had been killed a year and a half earlier, November 20th, 1975 in Preston, while traveling from Blackpool to Leeds. 26-year-old Joan was married with children. She struggled with alcoholism, addiction to cough medication that contained doses of morphine. She was murdered in a garage. She was found face down, covered by her coat. Similar to some of the other victims, her clothing was in disarray. Her bras were unfastened. She had been wearing 2 bras at the same time for some reason. Guessing she must have had exceptionally large breasts, needed additional support, but not sure. Her left leg was outside of her pants and tights. Left boot placed between her legs with the zipper open. Robbery was thought to be a motive in her murder because her purse and some of her belongings were missing. Several injuries were thought to be caused by kicking, and there were no stab wounds. In the end, investigators not convinced Joan's murder was connected to the Ripper murders. She was killed by some other dirtbag in the area who also hated women, I guess. It is scary to think about how many creeps like that just wandered around the earth at any given time. How many of those creeps? How many creeps are wandering around who would like to do this stuff, but just don't, only because they're afraid they get caught? That's scary to think about. The West Yorkshire police decided to index vehicle makes and registration numbers of cars with tires that could have matched the Irene Richardson crime scene, and that narrowed shit down to just over 50,000 potential suspects, including Peter Sutcliffe. So, good attempt, not super helpful. The murders and attacks continued to escalate throughout 1977, terrorizing the women of West Yorkshire. Before the year is up, we will connect with Peter, see what he has been up to besides wanton murder. But first, let's meet a few more of his victims. On April 23rd, 1977, less than 3 months since Irene Richardson's murder, 32-year-old Patricia Atkinson, who went by the name of Tina, murdered in her apartment in Bradford, West Yorkshire. Tina's boyfriend found her in the unit. Her head was, quote, almost smashed in. Clothing was, that poor bastard, my God. I mean, obviously poor her, but for anyone to see that too. Her clothing was in disarray. There were stab wounds, cuts on her body, including across her stomach. Her murder bore numerous similarities to other Ripper victims, only this time she was killed in her home. Investigators developed the following sequence of events regarding her murder. She's hit on the head from behind as she enters her home. She falls to the floor, lays there for several minutes. The killer then moves her to the side of her bed where he removes her leather coat, then pulls down her jeans and underwear. Bloodstains showed that Tina then most likely received another blow to the skull. Killer then moves her up onto the bed, leaves a footprint on the bottom sheet as he does so. Once on the bed, he hits her on the head again and stabs her many times. She suffered 4 major skull fractures, and her stab wounds most likely caused by a screwdriver or a chisel. A fucking chisel! That sounds more brutal than a screwdriver. She was loving hurting these women. Investigators discovered that Tina had lived a troubled life before a violent death. She married a man named Raman Mitra. April 1st, 1961, they had 3 daughters together. Tina was unfaithful to her husband. They separated several times over her infidelity, but stayed together for the kids. 1975, she was convicted of sex work. Raman was out for good at that point. Her divorce was finalized September 25th, 1976, and Raman was given custody of the girls. Shortly before she was killed, she had started performing sex work again after not doing it for a while to help with some debt. She went out drinking on April 23rd, 1977 at the Carlisle Hotel in Bradford. She got on stage after a stripper failed to show up, and an argument with the manager ensued. Yeah, you're not supposed to just kind of wing it in those places. Another sex worker saw Tina staggering down Church Street at 11:10 p.m. Last person to speak with police to have seen her alive. Next murder now. June 26, 1977. 16-year-old Jane McDonald, murdered in Leeds, just so young. 2 young kids found her body in an empty lot in Chapeltown, in that neighborhood. Jane's clothing was, like many of the other victims, in disarray. She also had a large wound in her stomach. And I said neighborhood, but actually, as I say that, that's not in my notes. It might be its own little separate city, suburb, but anyway, part of Leeds metropolitan area. Jane's clothing was, like so many other victims, in disarray. She also had a large wound in her stomach with a broken bottle top embedded in it. She had scalp wounds, skull fractures caused by a hammer, scratches and cuts on her breasts, deep stab wounds in her back that penetrated multiple organs. Her purse and ID found at the scene. She was killed while taking a shortcut home across that empty lot. She'd gone out with a friend to a bar in the city center earlier that night. She had dropped out of high school that spring to go to work. Jane was described as a happy-go-lucky girl who loved life, enjoyed going out, partying with friends. Her parents were beyond devastated. Of course they were. Her dad actually went into shock when he heard the news, became quite ill, never recovered, and died. When speaking to the press, Jane's mother said, "He has killed my Jane. She was a virgin, a clean living girl. How many more?" The fear in West Yorkshire spreads. The Ripper, as the press identifies him, already continues to kill. And he doesn't only kill sex workers, he kills women not in the sex trade. He kills them as young as 16. Actually attacked that one girl who was 14. Kills women as old as 41. I looked up pictures of all his known victims. And other than all looking Caucasian, like most women in West Yorkshire were, they don't look the same. Some have long hair, some have short hair, some are blonde, others brunette, others black hair. Some have blue eyes, others brown. Some are curvy, others waifish. He didn't seem to have a type. So I imagine most women in the area, from teenagers to the middle age, just were terrified. He went after sex workers, non-sex workers, teens, women in their, approaching middle age. If you were alive and had a vagina, you were his type. Just 2 weeks after Jane's murder, on July 10th, 1977, 42-year-old Maureen Long is now attacked in Bradford. Maureen would survive, but she would suffer severe head injuries, trauma, and depression. Maureen also never engaged in sex work. She was separated from her husband at the time of her attack, was living in Farsley on the borders of Leeds and Bradford. She and her husband were still friendly, so on July 9th, they'd actually met at a pub in Bradford for some drinks. Maureen drank 4 pints of beer. Pub closed around 11. Maureen left alone now to go to a ballroom. She loved going out for dancing. She was a regular at this particular unnamed establishment, danced with several men in the night of the murder, continued drinking throughout the night. She remembered going to the coat room around 2 a.m. A hot dog salesman saw her leave the club and head to the city center around 2 a.m. And before I move forward, a hot dog salesman? That's the term the source used. Hot dog salesman. Hot dog vendor would feel more appropriate to me. Hot dog guy. Guy at the hot dog stand. Who other than the source describes a dude just working a hot dog stand outside of a fucking bar or whatever as a hot dog salesman? I mean, I know it fits, but it just sounds too formal. Makes me picture a guy in a suit. He's got a little briefcase of brochures about hot dogs. Maybe got some hot dogs in the briefcase. You know, asking if you'd like to place a bulk order, gives you a little sample like you're at Costco. Maybe have a couple hundred hot dogs, high quality dogs shipped to your house. When he's not outside the bar, he's going door to door, trying to talk you into filling your freezer full of those sweet dogs. I want that to be a real job. Traveling hot dog salesman. And I want an infomercial for some sort of hot dog delivery business. Let me enjoy this little hot dog fantasy for a second here. Are you tired of opening your refrigerator door but not staring at fresh, delicious hot dogs? Don't have time to cook some big fancy meal, but do have time to enjoy a hot dog. But you can't, because you've already eaten them all. Let worries like these be concerns of the past when you subscribe to DoorDog. DoorDog brings delicious kosher wieners directly into your home. For just $99.99 a month, you can have 100 dogs delivered in 4 weekly shipments of 25 dogs each, fresh, hot beef, never tasted so good. All of DoorDog's hot dogs are made of 100% kosher beef, with no artificial flavors, colors, or byproducts. No pork, no raccoon, no rat, no eyeballs, no toenails, no miscellaneous slaughterhouse floor scrapings. Just quality beef and spices. And for an extra $30 a month, you can get our mustard, ketchup, onion, relish, and bun package. And for an extra $500 a month, 3 times a week, one of our hot dog salesmen will come into your house, make you a hot dog, feed it to you, rub your shoulders, toss you over their strong, sturdy back, burp you like the little hot dog baby you are, tuck you into bed for a refreshing post-hot dog nap. DoorDogs, when you need some hot beef inside you, but you don't want to go to the store, bar, ballpark, or nightclub to get it. I want a fucking hot dog guy. I want a hot dog guy coming to my house. Make me a fucking hot dog, you son of a bitch. Right? Feed me. Burp me. Fucking lay me down for a nap. Okay? Hopefully that was at least a little fun for someone other than myself. The police believe that Maureen might have been going to see her husband after passing by the hot dog guy. Around 3:15 a.m., a security guard who worked at a factory on Bowling Back Lane heard his dog barking. Not a hot dog, just a regular dog. He went to the main entrance, heard a car engine, then saw a car without its lights. Lights are off, driving away. He was certain it was a white Ford Cortina Mark II with a black roof. This guy knows his cars. And it looked like there was something heavy in his trunk. Or maybe he just, act like he knew more than he did. How the fuck would he know there was something heavy in the trunk of a car driving away at night with his headlights off? What do you have, X-ray vision? Shut the fuck up. Don't try and be a hero. Around 8:30 the next morning, residents of a caravan site off of Bowling Back Lane heard someone shouting for help. Maureen was found laying in an empty lot. Her memories of what happened to her were fuzzy due to the alcohol and the violence of the attack. Maureen said, "All I remember was trying to pick myself up. I kept falling, and then I wondered what was wrong with me. And I kept falling back, and as I were trying to pull myself up, falling back again. Then I was screaming, and I heard this dog barking, not a hot dog, and someone say, 'Oh, you're all right.' And that's all I remember. When you get hit over the back of the head, you can't remember things. If I hadn't had beer that night, I would have died of hypothermia." That hypothermia claim is actually not true. Common misconception. Alcohol makes you feel warmer in cold weather, as I record this during the middle of the winter, actually decreases your core temperature, primarily by decreasing your body's ability to shiver, which warms you up. It makes you more likely to get hypothermia. Alcohol, not your friend when it's cold out. The more you know. Maureen's attacker left her for dead. She suffered severe head injuries, including a massive skull fracture, 5 stab wounds to the stomach and shoulder, and 3 fractured ribs. She would spend 9 straight weeks in the hospital, need years of additional outpatient therapy. Damn. Maureen later, she healed, remembered being picked up for a ride by a fair-haired white man around 35 years old, over 6 feet tall. Peter was 5'8", I should add, but, easy to get that wrong when someone's sitting in a car. He was possibly driving a white car the night she was attacked. Peter is still driving a white car at this time. Peter's 31 years old. in July of 1977, but again, he looked older than he was. Police interviewed over 600 cab drivers. One of them was a man named Terry Hackshaw, who did match Maureen's description. Hackshaw lived with his mom between Leeds and Bradford. One of 15 men considered strong suspects in the attack. He'd been seen in his taxi near the ballroom on the night of the attack and drove a white Ford Cortina with a black vinyl roof. But the police didn't have enough evidence for a formal arrest, so they held Hackshaw for 36 hours at the detective training school in Wakefield, West Yorkshire, across the road from police headquarters, but then had to release him. During questioning, Hackshaw admitted he drove sex workers around in his taxi, but denied being a murderer. His car was searched. 2 hammers he owned, not in the car, at home, were tested, and his alibi was verified. Now let's meet one more Ripper victim before reconnecting with Peter fucking Hammer Beater. 22-year-old Jean Jordan was murdered October 1st, 1977, this time in Manchester, a mother of 2 children. 9 days after she was killed, on October 10th, her body was found under some bushes on a plot of land near Manchester's Southern Cemetery, an area frequented by sex workers and their clients. A spokesman for the Greater Manchester Police said it was one of the most horrific crime scenes they had ever investigated. Man, fucking Peter just keeps getting more sadistic. Local dairy worker and future comic, wrestler, and actor Bruce Jones, best known for playing taxi driver Les Battersby in Coronation Street from 1997 to 2007, found the body, which was in an advanced state of decomposition. Bruce, just 24 years old when he found the body, would experience nightmares for years because of what he saw. Jean's body was found completely naked. She had suffered severe head and stomach wounds. According to the lead investigator, quote, half her guts were hanging out. Detectives found a depression under a nearby hedge with some maggots in it. They determined that the killer had returned to the crime scene days after he had killed Jean and moved her body. After a story about the murder was published, a man named Alan Royal from Holme came in to report that his wife had been missing for over a week. He thought she had run off and gone back home to Scotland, as she had frequently done in the past. Alan and Jean had met in October of 1973 when she had run away from home at the age of 16. Alan saw her wandering near Manchester's main train station, struck up a conversation, and they quickly moved in together. But the pair had a turbulent relationship and broke up often. Alan told the police that Jean had recently been going out with some female friends and doing sex work to feed her kids. He said she would sometimes leave for days at a time. Jean left her kids with a babysitter on the evening of October 1st. She said she was going out to get some fresh air and buy some cigarettes. Alan went out for a drink. Jean never came back. He wasn't too worried at first, but then, of course, started to worry later when she didn't show up. Jean's post-mortem exam revealed she had suffered 11 separate serious head wounds, including skull fractures, caused by a hammer. Hammer blows had also knocked out or loosened numerous teeth. She suffered an additional 19 massive injuries to her shoulders, neck, and torso caused by the hammer. And her killer had stabbed her in the back with a large knife, slashed a deep gash into her thigh, and carved open that large hole in her stomach. The report concluded there were indications suggesting that the body had been clothed for some days after death and then stripped a day or so before the body was found. 5 days after her body was located on October 15th, Jean's handbag was found 60 yards away. Inside a secret compartment of her purse was a new 5-pound note, likely given to her by the killer. Detectives realized that the killer most likely came back to the scene to find that note, then threw the bag in frustration when he couldn't find it. This could also explain why her clothing was removed and why additional wounds were inflicted long after her death. She was just enraged he couldn't find that note. The note had a serial number indicating it came from the Bank of England, which had a branch in Leeds. A shipment of new notes had been sent to Leeds September 27th. The shipment was then distributed to several branches in the Leeds and Bradford area. Investigators determined that the notes were probably used for payroll by a local firm. The detectives worked out how many notes from the shipment were sent to each bank. A team of 30 officers from Manchester traveled to different firms to see where that money had been distributed, and investigators were able to narrow down a list to 34 firms that employed around 6,000 people. One of them was T and W.H. Clark Holdings Limited in Bradford, a firm of engineers who received several £1,000s of payroll. The firm provided a complete list of employees with names and addresses, and one of them was Peter Sutcliffe. So Sutcliffe still not a main suspect at this point, not even close. I mean, a lot of people on this list. Detectives were sent to interview him, though, as part of their routine inquiry into finding this note. He, again, just one name of about 6,000 names at this point in this search. November 2nd, 1977, 2 detectives go to Sutcliffe's home in Heaton, West Yorkshire. Sutcliffe was home with his wife when they knocked on the door. Before moving forward with their interview, let's first rewind. See what Peter Sutcliffe has been up to when he's not been out searching for new victims. He has been real busy working in the meat game as a traveling hot dog salesman, slanging so much sweet beef. No. 3 years before he first met detectives as one of the many men suspected of maybe being the Yorkshire Ripper, on August 10th, 1974, Peter married Sonia Sherma, daughter of Czechoslovakian refugees. Sonia's father was a PE teacher from Ukraine who left his home to teach at a grammar school in Prague. Before the Second World War, when Russia invaded Czechoslovakia, he was sent to a displaced persons camp where he married Sonia's mother, also from Prague. Sonia was born in 1951 in Bradford, West Yorkshire, 3 years after her parents arrived in Britain. Peter met Sonia at a disco night, at a local pub in 1966. When she was just 15, he was 20. Sonia went on to become a pottery teacher, and while she was in school, she said she was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia after experiencing a, quote, psychotic episode. Peter brought her home from the psychiatric hospital. Author Michael Bilton wrote, she had believed herself to be the second coming, complete with stigmata. So that's intense. Michael describes her as being naive and self-centered. Peter told her doctor she was overexcited, highly strung, and unstable. Nobody really has a lot of positive things to say about this lady. Barbara Jones, a journalist who had many conversations with Sonia after Peter confessed to being the Yorkshire Ripper, described her as, quote, the most irritating, strangest, and coldest person I have ever met. She's so incredibly prickly and demanding. Her relationship with Sutcliffe was later characterized by British author Gordon Byrne, who wrote a book about Peter called Somebody's Husband, Somebody's Son, the story of Peter Sutcliffe, published in 1984, as domineering, with Sonia willing to slap down her husband, quote, like a naughty schoolboy, while Sutcliffe even had to occasionally contain her physically by pinning her arms to her side during her common, unprovoked outbursts of rage. Well, all right. Clearly, Sonia was a lot to handle. She was difficult. Not who I expected Peter to be married to. Sonia was also obsessive about cleanliness. She didn't allow Peter inside their home if he was not wearing shoes. She would spend literal hours cleaning the carpet every week. Peter was not allowed to get food out of the fridge to make himself a meal. She had to do it. She sometimes would unplug the TV while he was watching it just to fuck with him. Makes me wonder if a lot of Peter's murders occurred shortly after Sonia slapped him around or antagonized him in some other way. Like if he just really fucking, part of him just hated her, but couldn't confront her. Peter was working as a long-haul truck driver when detectives first interviewed him in 1977. He'd been hired the year before, was considered a respected employee. Prior to that job, he had been back in court. October 15th, 1975, his former employer, the Common Road Tire Company, reported that he and a friend, Michael Barker, stole 5 secondhand tires, and Sutcliffe admitted that he did. Kept the tires in the trunk of his car. February 9th, 1976, Sutcliffe pled guilty to simple theft, fined 25 pounds for that crime. No one had any idea. He'd already committed at least 2 murders and multiple savage assaults. Peter and Sonia had no kids. After his later arrest, a friend revealed that they did want to adopt. They had both actually went to doctors, talked about infertility, tried to figure out who was not fertile, but the tests were inconclusive. This friend spoke to Peter 6 weeks before he was arrested for the final time, and Peter told him that they had made up their minds about pursuing adoption and were going to have a kid. Just living like he was never going to get caught. He'd been able to hide murder after murder from his wife. Why not be able to hide it from a kid as well? Peter and Sonia just purchased their dream home in Heaton after living with their parents for a couple years. They moved in September 26, 1977. Neighbors said they were an ordinary couple who appeared, quote, loving and devoted to one another. So I guess she had a sweet side. And now we're caught up. During his first interview with detectives, November 2nd, 1977, Sutcliffe could not produce any of the 5-pound notes from the wage packet given to him back on September 29th. He claimed that on October 1st, he was home with his wife, that on October 9th, they had a housewarming party. Said he last visited Manchester a year earlier when making a delivery for a previous employer. Sonia also spoke to detectives, said that after the party, Peter took some relatives home by car, but that he was then gone for some time. Oddly, when detectives filed their report, they wrote that Sutcliffe did not own a car, which was not true. At the time, he owned a red Ford Corsair, which he had purchased 5 weeks earlier. And right before that, he had a fucking white car. Sutcliffe, questioned again 6 days later, November 8th, repeated his alibis. The police, initially a bit suspicious of Peter, now think he has a reasonable explanation for all their questions. Peter's mother also now signs a statement confirming she was at the housewarming party October 9th. Detectives then discovered, though, that he owned a white Corsair which he had recently taken to a scrapyard. Marcella, remember, talked about her attacker driving a white car. There was other people talking about this white car, so suspicious, and they did not check Sutcliffe's car. They also did not do a search of his home. They asked him about tools and boots, which he then just lied about. And then when they finished their second interview, he didn't seem like a likely suspect for the murders to them. Author Michael Bilton later wrote in his book on the case, had they examined the red Ford Corsair, they would have certainly found it had two tires that could have left tread marks similar to those at the Richardson murder. That might have prompted them to probe further, question the alibi regarding the housewarming party. Their instructions demanded that the house, garage, and cars all be searched, but equally, Oldfield, the assistant chief constable and head of this investigation, had not stressed the importance of the tire marks left at the Richardson scene because he was convinced the killer was driving a Ford Cortina when he attacked Long. No specific instruction was given to record the makes of tires on vehicles owned by people interviewed. Neither were the officers briefed that they should look for a hacksaw which had been used to try to sever Jordan's head. So they fucked up. We all fuck up on the job. Luckily, the consequence is not as serious for most of our jobs. This fuck up will allow Peter to keep killing. Just over a month after Sutcliffe's interview, December 14th, 1977, he gets right back at it. 28-year-old Marilyn Moore, now attacked in Leeds. Marilyn was a sex worker. Peter attacked her in the back of a Sunbeam Rapier, a British car made by former British automobile manufacturer, the Roots Group. They kicked out a lot of cars in the UK for many years, but they're no longer around. The attacker lost his balance while beating her with a hammer, which allowed her to escape with her life. Still, she suffered severe head injuries. Marilyn was able to give a detailed description of the vehicle, which had been spotted in Leeds and Bradford's red light districts before, and helped create another one of those photo fits that bore a strong resemblance to the photo fits created by previous survivors. Tire tracks found in the scene also matched tire tracks found on another crime scene. And yes, Peter now driving a Sunbeam Rapier. A month later, January 21st, 1978, 21-year-old Yvonne Pearson, another sex worker, murdered in Bradford. Yvonne's body found hidden under a sofa near Lum Lane. She had been bludgeoned to death with some hot dogs this time. Strangely, all of Peter's future victims will be attacked with hot dogs. And I know that might not sound like a very serious weapon, especially compared to being hit by a hammer. But she was hit thousands of times with hot dogs, foot-long hot dogs, like Costco-sized hot dogs. Lots of onions on them, a little bit of relish, which added to the pain of being hit. No, I wish that was true. No, she was hit, of course, with a fucking hammer again, indicating she was another Ripper victim. The killer had also literally jumped on her chest and stuffed a wad of horsehair into her mouth that he had pulled out of that sofa she was found under. Jumped on her chest. He's clearly just getting off on being just fucking outrageously violent with these women. Just 10 days later, January 31st, another Ripper victim dies. 18-year-old Helen Ritka, murdered in Huddersfield, West Yorkshire. Helen was a young sex worker who was attacked at a timber yard. She had been struck on the head multiple times with a blunt object, probably a hammer, stabbed in the heart and lungs. Most of her clothing had been removed. Her bra and jumper had been pushed up above her breasts. Helen's body was not found for 3 days. She was discovered underneath a sheet of asbestos by the railway arches of the timber yard. She's the only victim Peter will later admit to having sexual intercourse with. And I think he seemed to have had sex with her before he attacked her. Possibly he paid for it, or at least made her think he was going to pay for it. Despite primarily focusing on sex workers, it doesn't seem that sex was his primary motivation for killing them, at least not sexual intercourse. There are never signs of sexual assault with these victims, but I think there's a pretty good chance he was fucking beaten off, on or near most, if not almost all of them. The Ripper murders have now become major news all around the country, especially in West Yorkshire, and the West Yorkshire police are under intense pressure to find the killer. April 25th, 1978, a special homicide investigation team called the Ripper Squad is formally established at Millgarth Police Station in Leeds. Assistant Chief Constable George Oldfield, we met him earlier briefly, named the head of the investigation. He had decades of experience, was considered a, quote, old-school police officer, worked long days, promised Jane McDonald's parents that he would catch their daughter's killer. Jane was that 16-year-old killed in Leeds back in the summer of 77. But as we will discuss later in the timeline, the Ripper Squad will make several critical mistakes during the course of their investigation, and they will interview Peter Sutcliffe a full 9 times before finally arresting him. In one interview, officers failed to notice that he was wearing a pair of boots that perfectly matched boot prints left behind at some recent crime scenes. To be fair to the detectives, though, huge hindrance in their investigation was just the sheer volume of information they had to sort through. Right? They're using an index card system to categorize evidence because they had no computers. They ended up using so many thousands of index cards that the evidence room had to be a room with reinforced flooring, just due to the weight of those cards. May of 1978, the Yorkshire Ripper returns to Manchester. On the 16th, 40-year-old Vera Millward, a sex worker and mother of 7 kids, murdered after leaving home for a quick errand. Around 10 p.m., Vera told her boyfriend she was going out to buy cigarettes. Minutes later, she was picked up by the killer, driven to the Manchester Royal Infirmary. Once she got out of the car, she's beaten with a fucking hammer again. He then slashed her stomach repeatedly with a knife, also jammed a screwdriver into the stab wounds. Fuck. She was also stabbed elsewhere in her body, finally dragged to a fence near the hospital where her body was found. And then Peter either enters a cooling off period or just does a better job of hiding the bodies of whoever he had killed for the rest of 1978. Maybe he was too worried about getting caught due to increased police presence, that all the attention his murders are getting. Early 1979, the Ripper Squad will fall victim to a major hoax that will throw their entire investigation off track. But before that, July 12th, 1978, Kenny Loggins releases his highest charting album on the Billboard 200 in the U.S., Night Watch. 7th track on the album. Little ditty he co-wrote with Michael motherfucking McDonald.
He's watching her go.
What a fool believes he sees. No wise man has the power. The first release of that legendary track doesn't quite hit the same now as when the Doobie Brothers did it, though, does it? Okay, 1979 now. After that little bit of silliness. January 20th, the Doobie Brothers released the same fucking song! That's how you do it! That's the version that won the fucking Grammy. Song of the Year, 2nd Grammy, Record of the Year, 1980. Inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame last year. A few people mentioned you all hadn't been McDonald in a while. McDonalded, so I had to rectify that. God, it always makes me smile, that song. Still, after all these years. February 25th, 1979, the Daily Mirror, London tabloid, releases an exclusive article revealing that Assistant Chief Constable George Oldfield had received letters from the killer that was signed Jack the Ripper. Oldfield had actually received these letters a year earlier in March 1978. He sent a copy to the Northumbria police because the letters were postmarked Sunderland, located in the county of Tyne and Wear, which is under the jurisdiction of Northumbria. Oldfield wanted the police to see if the handwriting matched any locals, but they were unable to help. Oldfield refused to publish these letters. The first was addressed to him, but the second was sent to the editor of the Daily Mirror. The 2 letters were published in Michael Bilton's book, Wicked Beyond Belief. Let's make this ridiculous letter a little bit more ridiculous by adding some background music that doesn't make sense at all. Chief Constable George Oldfield, Central Police Station, Leeds, West Yorkshire. Dear Sir, I am sorry I cannot give you my name for obvious reasons. I am the Ripper. I've been dubbed a maniac by the press, but not by you. You call me clever, and I am. You and your mates haven't a clue. That photo in the paper gave me fits. And that lot about killing myself, no chance. I've got things to do. My purpose to rid the streets of them sluts. My one regret is that young lassie MacDonald did not know cause changed routine that night. Up to number 8 now, you say 7, but remember, Preston, 75. Get about, You're right, I travel a bit. You probably look for me in Sunderland. Don't bother, I'm not daft. Just posted a letter there on one of my trips. Not a bad place compared with Chapeltown, Manningham, other places. Warn whores to keep off streets, because I feel it coming on again. Sorry about young lassie. Yours respectfully, Jack the Ripper. Might write again, not sure. Last one really deserved it. Whore's getting younger each time. Old slut next time, I hope. Huddersfield, never again. Too small. Close call, last one. Nothing really sounds that threatening when you add some kazoo music to it, does it? That nice little mocking tone. Also, the author of this letter, about as literate as the majority of people I see leaving comments on YouTube. The second letter reads as follows, which, I'm kind of in the mood for kazoo now. So I decided to score it with another kazoo track. It's amazing how many kazoo covers are out on the web. Chief Editor, Daily Mirror Publishing Office, STD code 061, Manchester. Lanks. Dear Sir, I've already written Chief Constable Oldfield, a man I respect, concerning the recent Ripper murders. I told him, and I'm telling you, to warn them whores I'll strike again, soon when heat cools off. About the McDonald lassie, I did not know she was decent, and I'm sorry. I changed my routine that night, up to number 8 now. You say, but remember Preston 75? Easy picking them, don't even have to try. You think they learnt, but they don't. Most young lassies, next time try older one, I hope. Police haven't a clue yet, and I don't leave any. I'm very clever. I don't think of looking for any fingerprints, because there aren't any, and don't look for me in Sunderland, because I'm not stupid, just passed through the place. Not bad compared with Chapeltown and Manningham. Can't walk the streets for them, whore. Don't forget, warn them. I felt it coming on again if I get the chance. Sorry about Lassie, I don't know. Yours respectfully, Jack the Ripper. Might write again after another one's gone. Maybe Liverpool, even Manchester again. Not here in Yorkshire, bye. I've given advance warning, so it's yours and theirs fault. Okay. That was an incredible cover of Final Countdown. Also, fuck that guy. Days after letters were made public, the Ripper strikes again. On March 2nd, 1979, 22-year-old Anne Rooney was attacked from behind at Horsforth College in West Yorkshire. She was hit 3 times, most likely by a hot dog. Nah, I wish. By a hammer. If only he had tried using a hot dog. God, then he wouldn't have been a killer. He would have just been a weird guy who just fucking annoyed women, bopping them on the head with hot dogs. Anne survived, and her description of her attacker matched statements from other victims, and most importantly, they matched Peter Sutcliffe's description. She also described a car similar to Sutcliffe's current ride, that Sunbeam Rapier type of car was described in the Marilyn Moore case. Third letter was addressed to Assistant Chief Constable George Oldfield, March 23rd, 1979. I'll spare you the kazoo music with this one in case some of you were like, I can't fucking take it. But maybe you'll miss it. Dear Officer, sorry I haven't written, about a year to be exact, but I haven't been up to North for quite a while. And I know this accent's fucking nonsense, but it's fun for me. I wasn't kidding last time. I wrote saying the whore could be older this time. Maybe I'd strike in Manchester for a change. You should have took heed. The bit about her being in a hospital. Funny the lady mentioned something about being in the same hospital before I stopped her whoring ways. The lady won't worry about hospitals now. Will she, I bet? You are wondering how come I haven't been to work for ages. Well, I would have been if it hadn't been for your cursed coppers. I had the lady just where I wanted her, was about to strike, when one of your cursing police cars stopped right outside the land. Must have been a damn copper, because he didn't say anything. He didn't know how close he was to catching me. Tell you the truth, I thought I was collared. The lady said, don't worry about coppers. Little did she know that bloody copper saved her neck. That was last month, so I don't know when I will get back on the job, but I know it won't be in Chapeltown. Too bloody hot there. Maybe Bradford's. Manningham. Might write again if up north. Jack the Ripper. P.S. Did you get the letter I sent to Daily Mirror in Manchester? I like it more with a kazoo. Less than 2 weeks after that letter was sent, April 4th, 1979, 19-year-old Josephine Whitaker murdered in Halifax, West Yorkshire. Josephine, a clerk, killed around 11:55 p.m. while she was walking home, attacked from behind with that fucking hammer, stabbed 21 times in the chest, stomach, and leg with a screwdriver, which was put inside her vagina after she had died. Thankfully, I guess. Also suffered multiple fractures across her skull. Like Jane McDonald, Josephine was considered another one of the, quote, respectable victims, and her murder worsened the tension and fear in West Yorkshire. In mid-June 1979, the police received a cassette tape now from the Ripper. For the first time, they believed they were hearing the killer's voice. And the person on the tape said, let me put some, a little bit more music in the background. I'm Jack. I see you still having no luck catching me. I have the greatest respect for you, George, but Lord, you are no nearer to catching me now than 4 years ago when I started. I reckon you boys are letting you down, George. You can't be much good, can ya? The only time they came near and catching me was a few months back in Chapeltown. I was disturbed. Even then, it was a uniformed copper, not a detective. I warned you in March that I'd strike again. Sorry it wasn't Bradford. I did promise you that, but I couldn't get there. I'm not sure when I'll strike again, but it will definitely be sometime this year, maybe September or October. Even soon if I get the chance. Not sure where. Maybe Manchester. I like there. There's plenty of them knocking about. They never learn, do they, George? I bet you warn them, but they never listen. At the rate I'm going, I should be in the book of records. I think it's 11 up to now, isn't it? Well, I'll keep on going for quite a while yet. Can't see myself getting nicked just yet. Even if you do get near, probably top myself first. Nice chatting to you, George. Yours, Jack the Ripper. No good looking for fingerprints. You should know by now it's clean as a whistle. See you soon. Bye. Hope you like the catchy tune at the end. Ha ha. Not sure what tune he was talking about. That tune I was playing was a kazoo cover of Billie Eilish's Bad Guy. It seems fitting, right? Kind of. Tape and the letters were made public soon after that. Within 6 weeks, the police received over 2,000 calls with potential leads to follow up on. Most significant detail was not the man's words, but his accent. The man claiming to be the Ripper in this tape had a northeastern Sunderland accent. If you recall, a few of the victims either did not notice the attacker's accent or pointed out he had a Yorkshire accent, both of which pointed to him being a local, but because of this tape, the police now began disregarding potential suspects with a Yorkshire accent, including Peter Sutcliffe, instead focusing on men with non-Yorkshire accents. Voice experts and other detectives warned it could be a hoax, but Assistant Chief Constable George Oldfield of the West Yorkshire Police truly believed the man in the tape was the Ripper and puts all the focus in that direction. Now, in part because the police are focusing so much energy on finding out the identity of this letter writer, this tape sender, 3 more women will be murdered between the hoax tape and Sutcliffe's arrest. And this is considered by some journalists in Britain to be one of the worst police mistakes in British criminal history. 2.5 months later, September 1st, 1979, 20-year-old Barbara Leach, now murdered in Bradford. Barbara was a student at Bradford University who was walking home from a pub when she was beaten to death with, of course, a fucking hammer. Body then dragged to a backyard where it was found covered by an old piece of carpet. Her clothing was in disarray. She had been stabbed multiple times with a screwdriver. Once again, the murder of a woman who is not a sex worker increases public alarm. Peter Sutcliffe was interviewed at least twice in 1979. Was on a list of names of 300 people concerning the £5 note in the Jean Jordan case still, but still not a strong suspect despite matching the physical description in multiple victim reports. To be fair, though, a lot of other suspects also matched the physical description. Roughly 10 months later, June 26, 1980, Sutcliffe in trouble once again for drinking and driving this time. Not exactly being super careful to avoid run-ins with law enforcement. 2 months later, he kills again. August 21st, 1980, 47-year-old Marguerite Walls, murdered in Leeds. According to author Michael Bilton, this is an unacknowledged murder by authorities. Sutcliffe murdered Marguerite while awaiting trial for his drunk driving charge. The source is called drink driving. I don't think that's British slang. Maybe it was like old British slang, drink driving. Instead of drunk driving, sounds so funny to me. Anyway, Marguerite was a civil servant. She left her office between 9:30 and 10:30 p.m. to walk home. The night she was killed, she was hit in the back of the head with a hammer. Sutcliffe hit her repeatedly with a hammer while calling her a filthy prostitute. Once she was incapacitated, he decided to move her up a driveway into a garden with a high wall, strangled her with a length of rope, removed almost all of her clothing before covering her body with grass and leaves, and then fleeing. The following month, September 24th, 1980, 24-year-old Abhadya Bandara, a doctor from Singapore, now attacked in Leeds. Bilton lists this attack as another unacknowledged attack by law enforcement. The police were under so much scrutiny already, it's believed that they started to try and not connect additional victims to the Ripper in an attempt to avoid further public fear and backlash. Abhadya was walking home after meeting some friends when Sutcliffe followed her into an alley, hit her on the head with his trusty fucking hammer, then dragged her by a rope wrapped around her neck, fled before killing her when some people approached. Almost exactly a month later, October 25th, 1980, 21-year-old Maureen Leah, former art student at Leeds University, attacked after visiting friends at a pub in Chapeltown. She was rushing to catch the bus when she was just struck on the head. Didn't even see who fucking struck her. She woke up in the hospital, learned she had a puncture hole in her skull, a fractured skull, fractured cheekbone, broken jaw, scratches and bruises. Hit her several times. That dude loved to fucking swing that hammer. Days later, November 5th, 16-year-old Teresa Sykes was attacked and left for dead in Huddersfield. She was minding her own business, heading to a shop when she was attacked from behind. Boyfriend was nearby when the attack happened, heard her scream for help, ran outside and scared the attacker off. She would end up needing brain surgery, but would recover as much as somebody can from being bashed in the head with a hammer by a complete stranger out of nowhere. Just 12 days later, November 17th, 1980, 20-year-old Jacqueline Hill murdered in Leeds. Jacqueline was a student at Leeds University, was returning back to her residence hall when she was struck on the head. Clothing was removed by the killer. She was stabbed repeatedly in the chest, once in the eye with a screwdriver. Ugh. Hope she was already dead when that happened. Week later, November 25th, the West Yorkshire police make another critical mistake when they failed to respond promptly to a tip from Trevor Birdsall, who filed an anonymous report against his friend, Peter Sutcliffe. He admitted that he had been out with Peter When Peter had committed an attack in 1969, that's when Peter followed that sex worker into a garage, hit her over the head with a stone and a sock. Trevor said he did not know Sutcliffe was planning to attack a woman that night. And this will not be the last time we hear from Trevor in this timeline. Just over 5 weeks later, Peter Sutcliffe finally arrested on January 2nd, 1981, but not in connection with the Ripper investigation. Sutcliffe was sitting in his vehicle in Sheffield, South Yorkshire, with a sex worker named Olivia Reivers. 2 police officers passed by, ran his license plates, discovered they were fake, so they arrested him. At first, Sutcliffe claimed his name was John Williams. Also said the lady in the car was his girlfriend, but then couldn't remember her name when officers asked. Sutcliffe also told the officers he needed to relieve himself. They allowed it, and during the short time he was unsupervised, he was able to dispose of a knife and a hammer. Sounds like Olivia was very lucky. Those cops stopped by to check on him. When he got to the police station, Sutcliffe said he needed to use the restroom again, and now he disposes of a second knife in the back of a toilet. Sutcliffe's name was passed over to the Ripper squad because he'd been found with a sex worker, and they found him in their index system. They saw that in his previous interviews, he had strongly denied contacting sex workers, but since he was now found with a sex worker, detectives decided to interview him again at the Dewsbury police station. The same officers also searched Sutcliffe's vehicle, found a couple screwdrivers in the glove box. And how weird is this? When Sutcliffe is later stripped at Dewsbury police station, he is found to be wearing a, quote, inverted V-necked jumper under his trousers. Like he's wearing a fucking, like a women's top upside down on his legs. The sleeves have been pulled over his legs. The V-neck exposed his cock and balls. The front of the elbows were padded to protect his knees, as presumably he would kneel over victims' corpses. Sexual implications of this outfit are pretty obvious. It was like his fucking jerk-off suit or something. Maybe he was sexually motivated, right? He's not raping victims, but he's probably jerking off, again, on or, near their bodies while he's wearing this weird beat-off uniform. God, the weird shit some of us choose to dedicate our lives to. Sutcliffe was questioned January 3rd. He claimed he left home 4 p.m. January 2nd to look for spare car parts, that he and his wife Sonia had an argument about his recent driving charge. They'd actually been arguing a lot about what would happen if he lost his job because he was due in court soon and was most likely going to lose his license. He said that at the scrapyard, he found a plate on the ground, thought he could use it and get away with having no insurance. Left the scrapyard at 6 p.m., spent an hour repairing the exhaust on his car, then picked up a few hitchhikers who offered him £10 for a ride. Soon after he arrived in Sheffield, he said a woman flagged him down. He claimed he thought she was in trouble, but then she asked if he wanted, quote, business. And he claimed he was confused and surprised, but what kind of business? What? I'm very innocent. What are you talking about? He said this first girl left, but then he encountered another girl who asked if he wanted to do some business. What are the odds? He's just trying to help ladies out, and they just keep wanting him to pay him for sex. What a crazy world. He said she got into the car with him, that he gave her £10 because, well, not for sex. He wanted to talk. That has to be sex worker John equivalent to saying, no, I only had 2 drinks, officer, I swear, when you get pulled over for a DUI. No, I just wanted to talk. Paying her for sex? Fuck, what? Me? Are you fucking serious? No, I just need to talk to somebody. And counselors are expensive. 2 years into his interview, or 2 years. Is that what I just said? 2 hours. I like 2 years though. 2 years into his interview, he just wouldn't fucking talk, but they wouldn't give up. They talked for 2 years straight. No, they talked for 2 hours. Before Sutcliffe did a handwriting test, he was reluctant to do a blood test, but was told if he wasn't the Yorkshire Ripper, well, he didn't have anything to fear. He was asked about his whereabouts on certain dates. He was confronted with evidence that his car had been seen in red light districts in Bradford, Leeds, and Manchester. Still denied paying for the services of sex workers. He's just talking to them. Around 11 p.m., officers returned to the scene in Sheffield where Sutcliffe was arrested, discovered the knife and hammer he had thrown about 50 feet from where the car was parked when he was taking a piss. And just like that, old Pete Dog, old fucking Peter Hammer Beater, becomes a prime suspect in the Yorkshire Ripper murders. Peter is detained overnight. That's, when he's stripped and they find his weird fucking upside down blouse situation. Next morning, January 4th, the interrogation team prepares for another round of questioning. They had the weapons that the Ripper used, that very specific knife and hammer combo, with a screwdriver often thrown in. They knew he lied about his interest in sex workers. They also knew he lied to his wife on the night Teresa Sykes was attacked. Sonia spoke to the police, admitted Sutcliffe was not home until 10 p.m. November 5th, night in question. A detective asked him around lunchtime, do you understand what I'm saying? I think you're in serious trouble. Sutcliffe answered, I think you've been leading up to it. Leading up to what? The detective asks. The Yorkshire Ripper, Sutcliffe said. Detective now says, what about the Yorkshire Ripper? And maybe seeing the handwriting on the wall, or maybe because some part of him just actually wanted to be caught, Sutcliffe replied, well, it's me. In the end, he made it pretty easy for them. Then he was asked if he wanted a lawyer, and he said he did not. Instead, he said, I just want to tell you what I've done. I'm glad it's all over. I would have killed that girl in Sheffield if I hadn't been caught. But I'd like to tell my wife myself. I don't want her to hear it from anyone else. It's her I'm thinking about and my family. I'm not bothered about myself. The two detectives questioning him were completely got off guard. They weren't even prepared yet to start taking a voluntary statement. Also still needed him to say something only the killer would know to make sure this isn't a false confession. So he was asked, you didn't go to the side of the house to urinate, did you? And Sutcliffe answered, no, I knew what you were leading up to. You found the hammer and the knife, haven't you? Now detectives prepared to take his statement. His confession would last a full 24 hours, split over 2 days. Sutcliffe admitted to 11 murders, denied the murder of Joan Harrison in Preston in November of 1975, also denied sending the Ripper tape or the letters. He described the murder of Wilma McCann in great detail, how he stabbed her in the lungs and throat. Wilma was the woman murdered just 100 yards from her back door in Leeds, West Yorkshire, October 30th, 1975. He confessed after that first time, I developed and played up a hatred for prostitutes in order to justify within myself a reason why I had attacked and killed Wilma McCann. And maybe that's really what happened. He said that after the murder of Helen Ritka, quote, I had the urge to kill any woman. The urge inside me to kill girls was now practically uncontrollable. He was asked about the murder of Jacqueline Hill and said, I followed her and hit her on the head with a hammer, and then I dragged her to some spare land out of sight. He admitted to stabbing her in the lung with a screwdriver, and he said he stabbed her in the eye because her eyes were still open after the attack. Sutcliffe knew all the names of the victims, but not because he kept newspaper clippings. He said, quote, they are all in my brain, reminding me of the beast I am. Later that day, Sutcliffe was able to speak to Sonia, tell her what he had done before she found out by reading the paper or watching the news. Their conversation went as follows, per author Michael Bilton. What on earth is going on, Peter? It's all those women. I've killed all those women. What do you mean? It's me. I'm the Yorkshire Ripper. I killed all those women. What on earth did you do that for, Peter? Even a sparrow has a right to live. One of Sonia's main concerns was whether or not he had had sex with women he killed. He said he only had done that once, referring to Helen Ritka. Why was that Sonia's primary concern? Was she worried about an STI or jealous? Was she relieved that he only killed most of the women or tried to kill them instead of tried to fuck them? I don't know. If your partner turned out to be a serial killer, would you be relieved to find out that at least they didn't have sex with or rape most of their victims? I'm not sure how I'd feel. January 5th, 1981, Sutcliffe was formally charged with the murder of Jacqueline Hill. Legal proceedings moved quickly. By May 5th, 1981, a jury had been sworn in for Sutcliffe's murder trial. By the time of the trial, Sutcliffe had now confessed to 13 murders, so 2 more than his initial confession, and an additional 7 attempted murders. Maybe he forgot about that pair of murders when he first confessed. I doubt it. That'd be fucking crazy. But maybe, when you attack and kill so many random people, you just can't remember them all. To hearing the previous week, Sutcliffe pled guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility, but the judge refused to accept that plea, ordered that the trial proceed as planned. Right? He knew what he had done. His mind was working just fine. In opening statements, the defense told the court that several psychiatrists were of the opinion that Sutcliffe was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia and that his mental illness substantially impaired his responsibility. Or he knew how to try to mimic the symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia because his wife actually did have that. In his interview, Sutcliffe indicated he was under the control of an outside influence when he committed the murders. However, the prosecution argued evidence would suggest that the murders were, quote, calculated and premeditated. Sutcliffe's method of killing, using a screwdriver, knife, and hammer, suggested he behaved in a very controlled way. Extreme, sadistic, but controlled. And in his interview, Sutcliffe said he was performing a mission. That's a quote of his, performing a mission, that he felt called to commit the murders. He was cleaning up the streets. Sutcliffe was asked what he would do if he was released from prison, and he responded, it would be wrong to say he would not kill again. Sutcliffe said that his mission was only partially fulfilled because the prostitutes are still there out on the streets. He claimed he received divine messages to kill sex workers. However, the prosecution noted that Sutcliffe did not mention these divine messages over the initial 2 days that he gave his confession. Additionally, back in January, when he first spoke with his wife in the presence of an officer, he said that he would be expected to serve at least 30 years, but that he might only do 10 in the loony bin if he could make people believe he was insane. He actually said that near an officer. If I can make people believe I'm crazy, I only get 10 years. Whoops. Should have maybe whispered that part. Prosecution also pointed out that on April 14th, Sutcliffe spoke with a hospital prison officer, insisted he was functioning perfectly normally. He seemed amused at that point. The doctors considered him mentally disturbed. Attorney General Sir Michael Havers spoke about the victims, telling the jury, in 5 years, there had been 20 homicide attempts on women and 13 had died. The women were aged between 16 and 47. Some were prostitutes of easy virtue, but 6 were women of unblemished character. Women of easy virtue. Why does that matter in this context? Are you supposed to get less time if you kill a sex worker? If you're a juror, should you care less if they die? That's so fucked up. Havers noted that Sutcliffe owned 5 cars during the killing spree, which he used to travel around to pick up sex workers. That his typical MO was to invite the women into his car, drive them to a secluded place, then attack them once they were in the back seat. But in some cases, he followed his victim while she was out walking and attacked her from behind. The jury would hear from 2 brothers who were Sutcliffe's next-door neighbors, who told the police that they went out drinking with him one night, ended up in a red light district in Leeds. We had no idea what we were doing. We didn't want to be there. We were just following Pete. Sutcliffe told him they were in Ripper country. This was exactly a month before the murder of Jane MacDonald. On the night of MacDonald's murder, Sutcliffe took the brothers out for drinks again, then dropped them off and went back out. A few hours later, Jane was dead. Brothers said that Sutcliffe talked often about sex workers while out drinking. That he once bragged about a time when a sex worker asked him for money and he, quote, cracked her one. Ah, what a cool guy. That's so cool you guys kept hanging out with that guy. He sounds awesome. Jury would hear from one of the first attempted murder victims, 36-year-old Anna, that name I can't fucking, Anna Ragulskij, who was attacked in the summer of 1975. Anna said she had gotten into an argument with her boyfriend, went to a friend's house. Sutcliffe accosted her twice, but she brushed him off. Around 2 a.m., neighbor heard a noise moments before Anna was attacked. In his confession, Sutcliffe told the police he was pissing in a doorway near a cinema. When he encountered Anna, offered to pay her for sex. She said no, spoke to her again. She elbowed him down and she walked off, and that pissed him off. So now he attacks her with a hammer. He admitted he very much intended to kill her. Sir Michael Havers told the jury that Sutcliffe initially started seeing sex workers after his wife Sonia formed a friendship with an ice cream salesman named Antonio. He was jealous. He was worried that his wife was going to cheat on him or leave him. Havers also brought up an incident from 1969 when Sutcliffe was, quote, duped out of 10 pounds by a sex worker. He intended to have sex with this woman, but changed his mind. Later saw her in a pub, asked her about the money. She rebuffed him in front of her friends, and he left feeling humiliated. Oh, poor little fucking baby. Havers suggested Sutcliffe hated sex workers primarily because of that incident. And why did Sutcliffe think he began killing? He mentioned that he'd gotten into a motorcycle accident in 1966. Said he suffered a head injury after crashing into a telegraph pole. Afterwards, probably telephone pole, but it's described as telegraph pole. Afterwards, he began to, quote, hear a buzzing and humming in my head. He said he experienced severe depression following this accident and that he no longer knew right from wrong. Sutcliffe claimed that following that accident, he developed an urge to kill, and then his urge to kill, quote, grew and grew until I became a beast. Sounds like a bunch of bullshit to me. I mean, possible, but I fucking doubt it. How much would it suck to be a decent person, then you get into a car accident, motorcycle accident, whatever. You survive, but now you have the urge to kill innocent people. What if that happened to me after my fucking truck accident? What if I used that? What if I started doing a bunch of bad shit? I'm like, well, come on. I mean, look at my record before the accident on the freeway. I was fine. Yeah, no, I kill people, but it's not my fault. He admitted he felt terrible about the murder of Jane MacDonald, adding, she was a young girl. I read about her father dying of a broken heart. I realized what a monster I'd become. Yeah, you kept killing. Key witness at Sutcliffe's trial was his old buddy, Trevor Birdsall, who had sent an anonymous note to the police in November of 1980. He ultimately saw detectives in person to discuss his suspicions about Sutcliffe. Birdsall decided to come forward after reading a description of a car spotted at the Jacqueline Hill crime scene. Birdsall had known Sutcliffe since 1966, said he never seemed aggressive or expressed violent attitudes towards sex workers. I doubt that last part. Not until 1969. He didn't seem aggressive the first 3 years they hung out. But then after 1969, he did. That was when he was out driving with Sutcliffe and Peter left the vehicle. And when he returned, said he had attacked a woman with a stone-filled sock. Birdsall was also with Sutcliffe the night Olive Smelt was attacked in August of 1975. Crossed his mind that Sutcliffe could be the attacker, but then he thought maybe not, because the voice in the Ripper tape didn't sound like him. Peter Sutcliffe began his testimony May 11th, 1981. Early on, he gave an infamous quote. When speaking about the police investigation, he said, "It was just a miracle that they did not apprehend me earlier. They had all the facts. Sutcliffe testified that he first heard God's voice when he was 20 years old. Get the fuck out of here. Said he heard God while he was at work as a grave digger at Binley Cemetery. Peter said that God spoke to him while he was digging the grave, and it made him feel important. He testified, quote, I paused for a moment. The ground was very hard. I heard something. It was a voice similar to a human's voice. It was like an echo, and I looked around, but there was nobody there. Sutcliffe climbed out of the grave he was digging, walked to the top of a slope to look around, found himself standing opposite the grave of a dead Polish man when he heard the voice again. He said it was coming from in front of me from the gravestone. It was like an echo, but he couldn't understand what the voice was saying to him. Yeah, totally. That makes total sense, that you would think that God could create the entire universe, but not speak in a coherent fucking manner to you. This grave-digging dimwit. Peter said that the headstone he stood nearest to had the image of Jesus on a cross on it. On the cross were the words Boko Jego, which he thought meant Jesus in Polish. Sutcliffe stepped back, thought he heard the voice say, Weeby Echo, which he assumed meant, listen to the echo. Uh-huh. He felt like he'd been chosen to hear God's words. Shut the fuck. Why would God be speaking to you in a language you don't even know? You dumb fuck. It makes no sense. God? Weeby Echo. Listen to the echo? Are you speaking Polish? Ultimately, he said he came to believe this voice from God was telling him to kill sex workers. Weeby Echo. Kill the sex workers, God? Clearly, he was just trying to, get that insanity defense. Sutcliffe testified that after his arrest, he did not expect to be charged with murder because he had, quote, confidence in God. He said he had the opportunity to drive away from the cops, but he didn't because he was confident God was watching over him. God who apparently hates women selling their pussy. God who wants these women dead, but also can't use his God powers to kill them himself for some reason. Oh, the nonsensical fucking mental hurdles people leap. I don't know if he even believes this shit, though. He's probably, again, just trying for insanity defense. Sutcliffe's defense counsel, James Chadwin, read some of his statements to the police at the trial. Here's a little sample. My desire to kill prostitutes was getting stronger than ever, and it took over completely. I realized things were hotting up. Hotting up? Not heating up? Okay. Hotting up in Leeds and Bradford, and I decided to go to Manchester to kill a prostitute because I had read in the newspaper about a priest chastising what was going on in his parish in Manchester, where there obviously were prostitutes. Totally. You're trying to help the church out. Psychiatrist Dr. Hugo Milne, questioned by the defense, pointed out that Sutcliffe misinterpreted the chastisement and thought it meant he needed to kill sex workers in Manchester. But again, did he really think that, or is he just trying to look as insane as possible? In his testimony, Dr. Milne disclosed that Sutcliffe did not show many classic symptoms of schizophrenia. Dr. Malcolm McCullough, another psychiatrist, testified that Sutcliffe told him that he had the powers of the universe, the power of his body to uplift himself. The prosecutor questioned how these two experts made their diagnoses outside of the fact that Sutcliffe just said he heard voices. McCullough explained that if there had been no evidence of divine mission, he still would have diagnosed Sutcliffe because of other symptoms. For example, Sutcliffe had grandiose ideas and believed he had extraordinary powers. Or at least he's just saying he does. He's claiming to. I mean, his powers couldn't have been too extraordinary since he wasn't able to free himself. The jury was not convinced of Peter's insanity. They were smarter than that psychiatrist because Peter was full of shit. Why do so many psychiatrists the defense finds? I mean, there's a lot of good ones. God, there's a lot of fucking shitty ones. Just the most gullible motherfuckers on earth sometimes become psychiatrists, it seems. On May 22nd, 1981, Peter Sutcliffe found guilty of 13 murders. The British judicial system, though, shitty place in the early 80s, very soft on crime, and he was only sentenced to 10 years in prison for each murder, and the sentences ran concurrently. So now let's jump to 1991 when he is back out, and he starts off killing again. Or let's stick to reality. No, he was sentenced to 20 life terms, thank God, with a recommended minimum sentence of at least 30 years, which is fucked. That is fucked that after all he was found guilty of, there was a chance for him to walk free again after 30 years, when he would have been 65 years old and perfectly capable of swinging a hammer pretty hard. The case of the Yorkshire Ripper had finally been solved, but Sutcliffe continued to make headlines, and the victims still had to work through lasting trauma. In prison, Sutcliffe started using his mother's maiden name of Coonan, trying to hide his identity. Nope. He'd be found out and assaulted multiple times in prison. In 1997, an inmate stabbed him in the fucking eye with a pen. Lost vision in his left eye. I love it. Hail Nimrod. Wish he would have fucking carved both of his eyes out and eaten them. Then shoved that hammer up his ass after maybe using it to flatten his nuts. Not that he had a hammer. I wish he would have had a hammer in addition to the pen. Anyway, 1984, Sutcliffe was transferred to Broadmoor Hospital, a psychiatric facility, due to supposed paranoid schizophrenia. Maybe he was paranoid because of that big blind spot. You know, he couldn't see with his left eye, that big blind spot left by the pen stabbing. Sutcliffe's younger brother Carl visited him while he was incarcerated. The police believe Sutcliffe could be responsible for more murders, but Carl spoke with the Yorkshire Examiner and said, I've asked him if he killed more, and he said no. He says there are no more. He says that's the lot. Carl also added, he doesn't seem to realize the damage he's done. It doesn't register. Well, Carl eventually stopped talking to Peter because of his brother's disgusting level of, quote, self-pity. He continued to deny responsibility for his murders, according to Carl. He would say, I didn't know what I was doing, and it was the voices in my head, and all that. Why would you give yourself alibis if you didn't know what you were doing? Carl also called Broadmoor a horrible place. He said, inside is weird. It's like every mass murderer you've ever heard about just walking about with Peter around the corridors playing snooker. November 13th, 1986 now, jumping ahead a little bit. Michael motherfucking McDonald releases his highest charting album in the UK, Sweet Freedom. Best of Michael McDonald reaches number 6 on the UK album charts and goes platinum. Also features a remastered version of this song. Incredible. Third time that sweet chorus has hit your ears in one suck. A dead giveaway this episode. Smooth as fuck.
Dead giveaway. Dead giveaway. My neighbor got big testicles because we see this dude every day.
Every day.
We eat ribs with this dude.
Now let's jump to 1994. Peter's wife Sonia would visit him for years after his sentencing. They actually didn't get divorced until 1994, 13 years after he was found guilty of committing 13 murders. Why the fuck would you stay with this guy? What's wrong with you? She reported, well, actually a lot. You know, there's a lot wrong with Sonia. She reportedly kept visiting him until she got remarried in 1997 and then just stopped because her new husband was jealous. But even then, she remained his next of kin. And now let's circle back to those Ripper letters and the Ripper tape that threw off investigators. Although the Ripper letters and tape had long been exposed as a hoax, the identity of the sender remained a mystery for decades until October 20th, 2005, when 49-year-old John Humble appeared before the Liege Magistrate Court accused of producing the letters and tape that led detectives astray during the Ripper investigation. Humble had been arrested October 18th after a 27-year investigation to find him, and he was charged with perverting the course of justice. He was finally caught because his DNA was linked to a sample found on one of the envelopes used to send the hoax, one of the hoax letters. March 20th, 2006, John Humble pled guilty to 4 counts of perverting the course of justice, and the very next day, sentenced to 8 years in prison. Humble told the police that what he did was, quote, evil. Said he was probably drunk when he sent the letters and tape. During the sentencing, the judge noted that Sutcliffe told the police the hoax gave him confidence, adding, the least that could be said was these victims would have stood a better chance of not being attacked had these police resources been directed in West Yorkshire. The judge also pointed out that at one point in the inquiry, the West Yorkshire police rejected Sutcliffe as a suspect because he did not have a Sunderland accent like John Humble did. And I started to laugh a second ago because I was thinking this next part. Humble's lawyer, before the judge sentenced him, trying to get the judge to be lenient, described him as a, quote, 50-year-old hopeless alcoholic who had kept a secret for 27 years, adding that John was, quote, less than bright after suffering from years of alcohol abuse and led a, quote, spectacularly inadequate life. That is a pretty blunt assessment. Your Honor, please, let's go easy on my client. Look at him. Look at him, Your Honor. He is just so fucking pathetic. I mean, he's bald. He's fat, he's dumb. His dick is tiny, he doesn't work. He stinks. Come over here and smell him. He really stinks. It's been hard to stand this close and not pass out. He has an absurd amount of nose hair. Did you see that? He never trims it. Did you know his balls are disgustingly, shockingly massive next to a tiny penis? His feet, teeny, like a baby's feet, like weirdly small. His teeth are wildly crooked and stained, even by British standards. His eyes, so fucking beady. It's a wonder he can see it all. Beady and cross-eyed, I might add. He has an extra nipple. Did you know about the extra nipple he has the size of a pancake in the center of his chest? Did you know his nose makes this grating, whistling sound? Right? Yeah, you're even hearing it every time he exhales. One of his legs is considerably shorter than... Stand up, buddy. John, stand up. Look at that shit. Speaking of short, he's 5'1". He has these tiny little T-Rex arms. And don't even get me started on his hair. Look, it's bright red like a fucking clown. So coarse. Put your hands on it. Feels like steel wool. Have you seen the big goiter on the back of his neck? Turn around, John. It's outrageous. Even if he wasn't a stupid drunk, he would still suck. He has no friends. His breath is so bad, no one wants to talk to him. Smells like rotten onions, gym socks, somebody sweated in, threw up in, then pissed on, left to grow mold in some locker room. His parents hate him. He's had 4 different rescue dogs. Every single one has bit him and run away the day he brought them home. Who is universally despised by dogs? John fucking Stinky, weird fucking looking Humble, Your Honor. Send him to prison. It's pointless. He's already in a prison of nature's making. You can't punish him more than he's already being punished just by being alive. Check this out. I'm going to literally take a piss on his face. John, get over here. Kneel down. Look, he's not even asking me to stop. That's how pathetic he is. He's not even closed his eyes. Who just keeps staring at you while you piss on their face? That's who John Humble is. A pathetic fucking piss face who makes me wish I was a serial killer so I could choke the wretch out and put him out of his misery. Hand me a hammer. I'll fucking beat him to death right now. Okay. I just love the idea of a lawyer being like, this guy's a fucking joke. Back to the trial now. Why did that sad dipshit do what he did? Humble apparently disliked the police because he was arrested as a teen for assaulting an off-duty police officer after some disturbance at a nightclub. And he's a big grudge holder. He wanted to embarrass the police. He said he didn't want the killer to go free. He didn't think the police would react the way they did and then he became extremely frightened by all the press his shit got. His lawyer noted that Humble tried to call the police twice and tell them the letters were hoaxes. But did he? I mean, did he try? He could have just walked into a police station, sorted it all out, but he didn't. Rubbish! Jumping ahead a few months now, June 1st, 2006, the now infamous Byford report is made public. The report was written by Inspector of the Constabulary Lawrence Byford, who was commissioned to analyze the criticisms leveled against the West Yorkshire police. The report was completed in December of 1981, but the government insisted it not be released to the public because it would not be in the best interest of the public for it to be released at that time. Really wouldn't be in the best interest of the West Yorkshire police. Finally released after the press filed a Freedom of Information Act request. Byford believed Sutcliffe committed many additional crimes. He wrote, between 1969 and the start of the known Ripper crimes in 1975, there was a curious and unexplained lull in Sutcliffe's criminal activities. It is my firm conclusion that between 1969 and 1980, Sutcliffe was probably responsible for many attacks on unaccompanied women, which he has not yet admitted, not only in the West Yorkshire and Manchester areas, but also in other parts of the country. This feeling is reinforced by examining the details of a number of assaults on women since 1969, which, in some ways, clearly fall into the established pattern of Sutcliffe's overall modus operandi. The report also revealed that in November of 1980, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher summoned the Home Secretary and told him, quote, the local police have so far failed totally in their inquiries into a series of murders which constituted the most appalling violence against women. It is now a question of public confidence. Within days, George Oldfield was sacked from his position as Assistant Chief Constable. Oldfield also suffered a heart attack during the investigation. Some of his friends called him the Ripper's 14th victim. He died of heart failure 4 years after Sutcliffe was caught in 1985 at the age of 61. The Byford inquiry found that the police had created a list of up to 850 suspect vehicles whose owners were seen picking up sex workers. In March 1979, Sutcliffe was one of only 3 car owners on that list who had previously been recorded as a, quote, triple area sighting. So clearly he should have been looked at a lot harder than he was. Reports stated he should have been regarded as a prime suspect for the attack, but was not interviewed due to a lack of appreciation of the information contained in the computer printout. Sutcliffe was interviewed again in June of 1980. After driving erratically, he was held for drunk driving, but released after officers checked with the Ripper Major Incident Room. Ripper officers told the arresting officers that Sutcliffe was eliminated based on handwriting, most likely referring to John Humble, the author of the Hoax letters. The Byford report also mentioned Trevor Birdsall, who filed a tip against his friend. Byford wrote, the failure to take advantage of Birdsall's anonymous letter and his visit to a police station was yet again a stark illustration of the progressive decline in the overall efficiency of the Major Incident Room. July 16, 2010, the Royal Courts of Justice ruled that Sutcliffe would never be released from prison. Fuck that 30 years. After he had to have his minimum term set to give him a chance for parole. The judge refused to allow new psychiatric evidence, stating that Sutcliffe posed a, quote, low risk of reoffending, and that his degree of responsibility was lowered by mental disorder or mental disability. Psychiatrist report stated that he had been on antipsychotics since 1993. Sutcliffe had refused treatment at Broadmoor until 1993, when the Mental Health Commission ruled it could be given forcibly. One justice wrote, This was a campaign of murder which terrorized the population of a large part of Yorkshire for several years. Apart from a terrorist outrage, it is difficult to conceive of circumstances in which one man could account for so many victims. Those circumstances alone make it appropriate to set a whole life term. Survivor Teresa Sykes said about the decision to keep Sutcliffe jailed for life, "It's never going to end with me, so why should it end for him? He has absolutely spoilt my life. Why should he get out and have a life? I haven't really had one." Yeah, fair. I think if I was in charge, he gets beat to death with a hammer. But, at least he gets kept in prison for life. November of 2015, Sutcliffe's ex-wife Sonia gives an interview to The Sun. Sonia, who had sued multiple publications for defamation in the past, tells the outlet, "People have claimed to have interviewed me when in truth, they have not. There have been a lot of bad things written about me, and they are not accurate. I would like the truth to come out one day, but I'm afraid to be extremely busy for the next 2 or 3 years. I have commitments I cannot get out of. I do not want to say what they are. One day I might do something, but I don't want to get your hopes up that is going to happen now." Okay. Still too busy after decades to candidly answer, I don't know, a couple hours worth of questions? Fuck off. 2016, Sutcliffe is declared mentally able to leave Broadmoor and is transferred to a maximum security prison August 24th. April 2nd, 2017, The Sun reports that Sutcliffe is interviewed about 17 unsolved attacks, but not charged with any more crimes. February 12th, 2018, the West Yorkshire police announced they have no intentions of charging Sutcliffe with additional crimes. John Humble, that pathetic shit stain of a man, convicted of the Ripper hoax, dies July 30th, 2019. He's 63. Humble died at his home in South Shields, where he'd been living since he'd been released from prison a decade prior in 2009. November 13th, 2020, Peter Sutcliffe dies at the University Hospital of North Durham. He's 74. At the end of October 2020, Sutcliffe had been treated for a suspected heart attack. He also had he had type 2 diabetes and a history of heart problems. On October 27th, he told a nurse he felt unwell and very dizzy. He went to the hospital to get a pacemaker the following day, but instead of being given a pacemaker, he's beaten to death with a fucking hammer. It's about time! Oh, God! It's a final countdown, motherfucker! Give me the hammer! Grab me the hammer! Well, this guy gets a little bit more intense with the kazoo. I wish. Sutcliffe tested positive for COVID when he returned to prison November 4th. He contracted it while at the hospital. He reportedly refused treatment. Good. Sutcliffe returned to the hospital November 8th and 9th, and on the 10th, and again on the 10th, where he remained until he died. November 27th, 2020, Sutcliffe's remains are cremated during a small secret ceremony at an unknown location. His brother Mick told the Daily Mirror that he and the other Sutcliffes were frozen out of this little ceremony. Originally, family members were allowed to attend via Zoom, but Mick was then told the funeral had already taken place. Sonia had organized it, apparently, or at least that's what he thought. Mick said the family wanted to get some closure because Sutcliffe put our family through hell. Mick wrote a eulogy for the service, which he shared with the Mirror. He wrote, "Peter, all of your family love you as Peter Sutcliffe, although you ruined all of our lives when you became the Yorkshire Ripper." Yeah, fair. Several family members of victims spoke to the press after Sutcliffe died, using it as an opportunity to shift focus to the victims. Richard McCann, son of victim Wilma McCann, said, "My mom was more than just a good-time girl or a woman of loose morals, as she was described by the police. I want the force, once and for all, to give some closure and apologize for the way it describes some women. The things that were said in particular by George Oldfield were about some of the victims having doubtful morals, and the comments about Jane McDonald being an innocent victim. Weren't they all innocent? These words to me suggest that some lives taken were worth more than others." After Sutcliffe's death, West Yorkshire Police Chief Constable John Robbins offered a heartfelt apology for the victims for the language used by senior officers during the investigation, which caused families, quote, "additional distress and anxiety. Such language and attitudes may have reflected wider societal attitudes of the day, but was as wrong then as it is now." And that takes us out of this timeline.
Good job, soldier. You made it back. Barely.
So that is the story of Peter Sutcliffe. Before continuing, there is a brief audio recording of him, just one, I think, speaking to an unnamed person on the phone. Comes from the early 2000s. Just wanted to hear his voice. Not what I expected.
ago, before I was on the mission, you know. I
Yeah.
had voices for 2 years,
What
getting
did-
good advice when I got depressed and
What?
thinking about my grandma that was buried in the cemetery where I worked and that, you know. She lived with us, we were very close,
Yeah.
and I blamed myself for her death.
Yeah. Because you used
She
to.
was coming down the steps and there was we had two little kittens, you know, we were playing with them at the bottom of the steps. I was in the kitchen, sat at the table, and I heard a clumping down the steps.
Yeah.
And she was about nearly 80, you know, and a bit unsteady on her feet. And I said, Grandma, be careful. She was nearly at the bottom. I said, there's a kitten playing there. And clump, still kept coming down, you know. And she...
Just a mild-mannered, sensitive guy just talking about kittens and missing his nana. Just sweet little fella. Just a little guy playing the victim. He didn't want to do what he did. The voice in his head made him do it. He's the biggest victim. I watched an interview with the noted forensic psychiatrist, Dr. Gwen Adshed, an expert in criminality in the UK for 3 decades, who saw him at Broadmoor. And she spoke about how mild-mannered he seemed. Not a big guy, right? 5'8", average build, not particularly muscular, nothing intimidating about his physical appearance. And she talked about how at quick glance, you know, nothing about him screamed serial killer, nothing about him screamed this guy is violent. She said, quote, I just saw a middle-aged man. You know, it's not necessarily there in their face or their body. There's nothing to see. You really have to spend quite a lot of time talking to people before you can kind of get at the states of mind that led to causing great cruelty and harm to others. And that is how that fuck was able to bash so many women on the head with a hammer. They never saw it coming. They never thought that they were with a psychopath until he started to swing. And then it was generally too late. And that's what makes these guys so scary, right? They just blend in. Peter's longtime friend, Trevor Birdsall, spent time with Peter for well over a decade. He had his suspicions that Peter was the killer. He reported Peter to the police, but also he kept hanging out with him. He wasn't sure that the guy was an evil killer of women. You know, Peter wasn't monstrous in his presence. Peter's wife, Sonia, I mean, she was pretty weird, but she didn't seem to know, who he really was. Crazy that you can lay next to somebody in bed night after night for years. You can love somebody, share your life with them, but still not really know them. Don't you sometimes wish you could see into somebody's mind when you wanted to, right? Find out what they really think, who they really are. But you just can't. You have to either just trust that they are who they present themselves are or not. Or present themselves as, There's an element of faith when it comes to befriending somebody or dating somebody. To getting into a car with somebody for the first time, to sleep with somebody for the first time. Are they who they seem? You want to be able to trust your gut, tell yourself you're a good judge of character, and maybe you generally are, but slippery fuckers like Peter, they can still fool you. So, I guess be careful out there. Make sure if you're going to get into a car with a stranger that somebody you know knows where you are going and, most importantly, knows who the person you're getting in the car with is. Have them take a pic of their ID. Give them a reason to think that if, you get hurt, people are going to find out and they're going to know who to report to police or who to report to the police. Watch out for your friends. Let your friends watch out for you. Have fun, enjoy your life, go on adventures, but at least try and be a little bit careful because you never know who might be the next Yorkshire Ripper. And now, let us learn a bit more about that sneaky, hammer-happy son of a bitch in today's takeaways.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
Number 1, Peter Sutcliffe hated sex workers. Exactly why remains unclear. Some experts believe he hated women in general because he grew up in a household where he was abused for siding with his mom, while investigators and prosecutors say he developed a hatred for sex workers because one woman stole some money from him. Probably a combination of those two and some other things. I still wonder how much his wife Sonia factors into that. Sutcliffe himself said that he heard God speaking to him and believed he had a divine mission to kill sex workers. But come on. Number 2, like many killers, Peter Sutcliffe lived a double life. He was never married. What the fuck? When did I forget how to read? He was married. My brain just randomly put never in there for no reason at all. He worked as a long-haul truck driver, wanted to start a family. His wife certainly noticed that he went out often, stayed out late, but she believed his many excuses regarding what he was up to, or was just glad to not have him around the house. Sutcliffe drove around the red light districts of Leeds, Bradford, even Manchester, searching for victims. He attacked sex workers he lured into his vehicle, or just stalked and attacked random women walking down the street. His MO was to use a hammer, then inflict quick stab wounds with a knife or a screwdriver, or both. And that became the disturbing signature killing style of the Yorkshire Ripper. Number 3, Sutcliffe was finally apprehended in January of 1981, but not in relation to the Ripper investigation. He was arrested for having stolen license plates on his vehicle, but after realizing he'd been questioned as part of the investigation and discovered a knife, hammer, and screwdrivers that had been in his possession, detectives felt certain he was the Yorkshire Ripper, and he soon confessed to multiple murders. Number 4, Peter Sutcliffe was interviewed 9 times before he was arrested, and he was never considered a strong suspect despite multiple pieces of evidence linking him to murders. When the West Yorkshire police received a hoax letter, or I guess those multiple hoax letters, and that tape from a man with a northern accent, they discounted Yorkshire locals as suspects. Sutcliffe remained off law enforcement radar, and 3 more women were murdered. And number 5, new info. Did Peter Sutcliffe commit additional murders in Sweden? 26-year-old Teresa Thorling lived in Malmö, Sweden, with a boyfriend who was 20 years her senior. She did sex work to buy drugs and struggled with addiction. Malmö was a commercial hub at the time. Ferries came and went often from the city, and unlike nearby Copenhagen, there was no formal red light district. On August 30th, 1980, Teresa took a bus to the city center in Stockholm. A bus showed she departed at 4:45. She was last seen walking downtown in the early evening. One woman thought she saw Teresa walking off with a client. Another saw her talking to a man in a car. 2 days later, a man collecting bottles found her body in the stairwell of a building scheduled for demolition. She was covered by a piece of carpet. Body was nude. Square cut stick of wood had been forced into her ass. Oh my God. She'd been hit on the back of the head with a blunt object before she died. Her cause of death was most likely strangulation, but a high level of narcotics was also found in her blood. There was no evidence of rape, but a substance was found on her back that could have been semen. Detectives soon connected the case to a murder in the Swedish city of Gothenburg that occurred on August 12th. 31-year-old Gertie Jensen was a part-time sex worker there. She was found nude at a demolition site. Her head had been beaten with a brick. There were several early leads, and Teresa's boyfriend was interviewed, but that led nowhere. Both cases eventually went cold. In August of 2016, Bo Lundqvist, the detective superintendent of the southern region of Sweden, received an email from the West Yorkshire police about Operation Paintball, a cold case investigation into additional murders and assaults that may have been committed by Peter Sutcliffe. 2 of those potential cases were the murders of Gertie Jensen and Teresa Thorling. Lundqvist was aware of Peter, but this was the first time he was hearing about a potential connection to Swedish crimes. The email explained that the West Yorkshire police found a telex that had been sent to their office by Interpol in the 80s, indicating Sutcliffe may have traveled with the truck on a car ferry between Sweden and Denmark. The email listed the dates August 30th and September 1st, 1980, which coincided with the murder of Teresa Thorling. Back in the 80s, the 1-hour ferry was a very busy route. Lundqvist found documents indicating Sutcliffe had been named as a suspect in the past, and there was a cold case review in 2005. Detectives also kept a hair found at one of the crime scenes. However, a Swedish law dictates that any unsolved crime that took place before July 1st, 1985 can no longer be investigated. I don't know why that law was passed exactly. Can't figure it out. Lundqvist could not reopen the case, but it was possible the British police could get involved. To get past this strange statute of limitations, Lundqvist has worked with criminal psychiatrists and profilers to build a case for testing the hair preserved as evidence. Lundqvist believes both murders were carried out by the same perpetrator, and if the same person killed 2 victims, there are likely more victims, and perhaps one of those crimes occurred after that 1985 cutoff date. Lundqvist used this argument to justify DNA testing on the hair. As of 2018, he was still waiting results from the Swedish National Forensic Laboratory. If he has gotten those results, they haven't been made public yet.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
The Yorkshire Ripper has been sucked. Thank you to the Bad Magic production team for help in making time suck. Why are words so hard sometimes? Thank you once again, probably because I'm saying a fucking lot of them every time I record, I guess. Thank you once again to Queen of Bad Magic, Lindsay Cummins. Thanks to Logan Keith helping to publish the episode, designing merch for the store at badmagicproductions.com. Thank you to Olivia Lee for her initial research this week. She said, I think it was her suggestion actually to do the Yorkshire Ripper. Also, thanks to the All-Seeing Eyes moderating the Cult of the Curious private Facebook page, the Mod Squad making sure Discord keeps running smooth, and everyone over on the Timesuck subreddit and Bad Magic subreddit. Now let's head over to this week's Time Sucker updates.
Updates? Get your Time Sucker updates.
Let's start with something adorable before talking about some shit from last week. Mrs. Melissa Broussard sent in an email with the subject line of "Got married in Texas, 3 out of 5 stars." She writes, "Hi, Dan or Lindsay or Logan or whoever is reading this." Well, Lindsay read it first. Send it to me. So yes, 2 of your bad magicians that met because of first-year summer camp totally did it. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm married to the most amazing man ever. See attachment for proof. Attached your wedding certificate. Beautiful. And it's all thanks to you and Lindsay for producing some badass magic. I haven't posted in the camp Facebook for some time due to deletion of the social apps and not pulling out the laptop yet. But I wanted to share with y'all and say again how grateful we are for you creating this beyond incredible community. We never would have met in a million years if it wasn't for your kitchen table and the exorbitant amount of energy from yourself and your amazing partner. Hope your holidays were fantastic. Mine were, because I finally have a home with someone to love who loves me right back. I get allergies every time I think of where I've been, where I am now, and where I'm going. Thank you for assisting in making those allergies oh so beautiful instead of the darkness they harnessed prior to your little experiment. Please pet Bojangles for us. Hail lovely Lucifina and long live Nimrod and all his other minions. 2 gratefully loyal bad magicians awaiting your cult. P.S. If you happen to read this on air, just want to say camp changes lives. Buy your camp tickets. And a big ass shout out to my incredibly amazing and wonderful husband, Chris, who gives me a reason to keep growing every day. Oh, man. Love it, Melissa. So happy for you. Love that you and Chris met at camp. Man, love that you're so just blissfully married. Seem to have found your person. And I promise I did not include this email as some sort of plug for camp. I actually haven't plugged camp in months. But if you want to go to camp, there's already going to be a lot of people going. It's going to be so much fun. Head to badmagicproductions.com. Scroll down to the big banner. Get a ticket for Wet Hot Bad Magic Summer Camp 2025, September 4th through the 7th. I hope your marital bliss continues for the rest of your fucking life, Melissa. Best advice I can give is just to talk about everything. Talk it all out. Listen to each other. Lindsay and I, over a dozen years in our relationship, still talking, listening, learning new things about each other, still evolving, growing, to use your word, adapting to changes in each other, staying in sync because we communicate about every fucking thing. I love, and I'm so happy for you both. And now, oh boy, I hope you're not eating right now. Take a little break from eating if you are. If you're eating something brown, you're gonna want to like pause. You're gonna want to finish it, skip ahead maybe. We need to talk about some serious shit. World champion shitter Delaney wrote in with the subject line of "God, I hope this is the right email. If not, oh boy." They wrote, "Hello, Dan. My name is Delaney. I have a lot to say in a crazy shit story. I've been listening since your 3rd episode came out on Spotify about 7 or 8 years now. Fuck, that's awesome. Thank you. Want to thank you so much for everything you portray in this podcast. You've helped so many of us get through some dark times. Thank you. You kept me smiling for 5 years while I managed a large-scale turkey farm. We're talking 8 barns housing 20,000 each. Holy fuck, that's a lot of turkeys. Which was truly hell. Story all on its own, and factory farming would make for a hell of a time suck. Your antics have been there while my wife and I battled 6 years of alcoholism. I almost lost my wife to it, so give a shout out to the wonderful staff at Hazelton Betty Ford Treatment Center for bringing my best friend back to me. Now, that's beautiful. Now for the biggest shit you may have ever heard about. When I was 16 in high school, and this was, by the way, the biggest shit I'd ever heard about. When I was in 16 in high school, I suffered from OCD like I do now, but it was much worse then. I had germophobia. I didn't touch doorknobs or anything anyone's hands would touch. I certainly didn't shit in public restrooms, which led to constipation, which was affected heavily because this was after wrestling season, so I've been gorging myself with food. Well, days turned to weeks. And after 4 weeks, that's crazy, 4 weeks of not shitting, I had horrible cramps, tried multiple laxatives with no success, got x-rays where the doctor was puzzled, looked at them with a shocked face, showed me my colon was so full of shit I had 2 options. They either shove a not-so-small tube up my ass or I get cut up. So I went with the tube, and it was strange. They weighed me before and after. Now, I don't think there's any way to describe the feeling of having 3 full, warm IV bags pumped into your ass or the ungodly, volcanic-like eruption that preceded. Dan, it was like Harry on Dumb and Dumber, but for 15 minutes. Oh my God. I flushed 3 times before ever touching the toilet to my poor blown-out chocolate starfish. So what was the end result? 17 pounds of shit. I shit you not. Oh my God, I had to do butthole exercises for months to retrain my bump sensor on how to take normal dumps again. But like they say, that's how I do it in Hollywood. 3 out of 5 stars, never change a goddamn thing unless it betters the life of you and your family. Much love from me to you, and shout out to my wife, Courtney. She's my best friend, wonderful mother, and I wouldn't be here to type this without her support over the years. Truly thankful, Delaney. Not going to lie, Delaney, I kind of wish you would have sent this email to the wrong email address before you sent it here. What an email for somebody to get out of the blue. 17 pounds. I didn't know that much poop could be stuck inside somebody at one time. A full month? A constipation? As somebody who poops too often, I can't even begin to understand that. That's fucking insane. I had to look, well, I didn't have to. I chose to look into the world's heaviest recorded poop after your email. Guinness Book of World Records, they have yet to firmly establish, their own like poop record holder for like largest poop, which would be tough to verify that, because you'd have to be there when they're pooping and you can't know until you've already pooped. But according to the Times Now website, a 53-year-old Chinese woman referred to as Who had 44 pounds of poop surgically removed from her in 2023 after a bout of severe constipation. Her shit was described as looking like a 3-foot-long python. Oh my God, in appearance. Like a big fat yardstick and dense. According to the doctors, Who was diagnosed with Hirschsprung's disease, a congenital defect in which some nerve cells are missing in the large intestine, so the small intestine is not able to move the stool, doesn't get the right signals, and it becomes blocked. Wow, I don't think I've ever shit more than 2 pounds at one time. But who knows? Like, I kind of wish my toilet had a built-in scale now. Why don't toilets have scales? That'd be awesome. Also, glad life is going well for you and your wife, Delaney. May both of your shits never reach 17-pound status ever again. And now I want to share something I probably should. Lindsay hates talking about poop so much, like really loathes it. But my daughter Monroe loves to talk about poop. And I'm fascinated with poop. And she, I've done this in the past. I've taken a few pictures of dumps over the years. I'm like, that's fucking impressive. And we bonded over the fact that without even me telling her, she does the same thing. And she showed me a picture of her poop. I'm not going to lie. I was pretty proud in a weird way. I was like, that's fucking massive. How the fuck did that come out of you? And she was proud. And I know that's gross, but it makes us laugh. Okay. One more shit-related email now from Poo Peddling Butthole Washer, James Ryan, who sends in an email with a subject line of bidet. James writes, hi, Dan. Huge fan of your shows and your stand-up. I've boasted about your Timesuck podcast. It's about everybody I know, especially if the topic is something historical. Often say you would be an amazing history teacher. Thank you. For me back in school, history would have been pretty awesome if I had a teacher giving verbal essays the way you do. Yeah, it's sad that they would get fired for doing so. Regarding bidets and your hesitancy on getting one, just do it. Just do it. But don't get a cheap one. Pony up to 300 plus. Get a good one. Temperature control seat, temperature control asshole blaster, and an LED light in the bowl that you wouldn't think anything of until you see it. It's pretty cool. All the other wild features that are out there are kind of nonsensical. Warm seat, warm water. That shit will change your life, though. After having a bidet at your home for a while, pooping elsewhere and trying to wipe your butt with TP will leave you feeling like you've not fully completed your task. And I know you think, like I think I do, when the bidet starts blasting once in a while, you'll blossom your poop hole. There's no shame in that. Everybody does it. Thanks a bunch, James, San Antonio, Texas. James, you make a great poop pitch, kind of. I'm a little scared of my butthole blossoming. What does that even fucking mean? It sounds bad. Makes me nervous. I know, oh, it's flowery. I don't know if I want my butthole to be flowery. Is that like a prolapse? Isn't a prolapse real bad? Don't you have to go to the hospital for that? I don't know. I don't think I want that kind of pressure on my asshole. But nice watery massage does sound pretty nice. Better than the abuse my butt sometimes receives from some toilet paper when I get frustrated that I've been pooping too often. I'm gonna keep thinking about it. I need to rent a hotel, like a nice hotel room with a nice bidet. Give it a little trial run. Kind of freaks me out still, but maybe. Now for a new update to an old episode from super caring meat sack, beautiful soul Sean Sheridan, who writes in with the subject line of relisting the catalog, homeless epidemic from the perspective of a transitional housing center. Hi, Timesuck team. Sean writes, apologies for no creative nicknames, but I had to keep putting this email off. But I keep putting this email off and wanted to make sure I got it out. I'm going back to the whole Timesuck catalog and just re-listened to the homeless epidemic Timesuck. When I listened before, I worked in ministry and dealt with some low-income families and thought I had an understanding. But now I've moved into running a teen center at a house of refuge, which is a transitional housing nonprofit, so I was much more interested in your research. For starters, a lot of your information was correct. There are a lot of issues facing those who are homeless, and nothing will change unless we educate people on how to save themselves. We offer a variety of services, including 2 free after-school programs, one ages 5 to 11, another ages 12 to 17. That's awesome. as well as case management with an advisor who helps with finances, including applying for new jobs, working towards promotions, getting more education, creating and sticking to a budget, paying off debt, and more. I mostly wanted to let you know that there is so much more work to be done, and we now, since that Timesuck, are no longer government funded at all. Everything is funded by donation, and most of our organization only works with volunteers. And I know we aren't the only ones, so truly thank you for the donations you send to organizations and how you talk them up at the beginning of each show, that you announce donations. I know, I need to start doing that more. I've gotten out of that habit. You can go to badmagicproductions.com and see all of the places we donated to the last several months. Makes a world of difference for nonprofits like ours. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without others being involved. If you want more info, all of our links are in my signature, and I'd be happy to share anything else. If you have questions, keep on sucking. Sean T. Sheridan, Youth Engagement Coordinator, houseofrefuge.org. Yeah, just no spaces, House of Refuge, REFUGE.org. Sean, thanks for getting the word out about the importance of donations and the lack of government funding for certain organizations like yours. And the problem of homelessness in America, yeah, it is growing since that episode. 653,104 people experienced homelessness in the U.S. in 2023. A sad new record, a 12% increase over 2022. Every ethnic group endured an increase in homelessness in 2023. The Asian community experienced the most significant percentage increase, 64%, while Hispanics/Latinos saw the most significant surge in raw numbers, an additional 39,106 people. The number of homeless in America has increased each and every year since 2016. And if the wealth gap continues to grow, which sadly it looks like it will, this problem is just going to get worse. So thank you, Sean. Thank you for fighting the good fight. You seem to be a very, very caring, loving person. Houseofrefuge.org. I checked it out, and it sure looks like an amazing organization. Thanks for the updates, everybody.
Thanks, time suckers. I needed that.
We all did.
Well, thank you for listening to another Bad Magic Productions podcast. Scared to Death and Timesuck each week. Short Sucks and Nightmare Fuel on the Timesuck and Scared to Death podcast feeds twice a month. Don't hit anybody with a hammer this week, especially on the head, unless you're defending yourself. In that case, I don't know, maybe hammer away, And then send an email into bojangles@timesuckpodcast.com. Let me know how it went. I'll probably read it on the show, especially if you hammered somebody who's trying to hammer you with a hammer. Hammer fight. Bonus points if they're a crazed door-to-door hot dog salesman. That story's going to be fucking epic. For everyone else, just please keep on sucking.
Bad Magic Productions.
And now, how about one more kazoo song? YouTuber Izzy Humer bought 100 kazoos at Party City, fastened them all together into one big-ass kazoo snake, and played Careless Whisper by Wham. And it sounds fucking terrible. But I am still so glad she did it, because it makes me smile every time I listen to it. No rhythm, no, it's easy to pretend. I know I'm not a fool. Better than to cheat a friend. The way I dance with you. Oh, oh. So silly.